Active recall. Here is something strange and a little unsettling about the way almost everyone tries to learn. The method that feels the most productive is, in truth, one of the least effective, and the method that feels like struggling and failing is the one that actually works. Most people, when they want to learn something, read it over. Then they read it again. They highlight, they underline, they review their notes, and as the material grows familiar under their eyes, they feel a warm and reassuring sense that they are learning. But that feeling is a kind of illusion. Familiarity is not the same as memory. Recognizing something when you see it is not the same as being able to summon it when you need it. And the cheat code that closes this gap, quietly and powerfully, is called active recall. The idea is almost absurdly simple. Instead of putting information into your mind over and over, you practice pulling it back out. Rather than rereading the page, you close the book and try to remember what was on it. Rather than reviewing your notes, you put them away and ask yourself what they said. Rather than looking at the answer, you force your mind to reach for it first, even when reaching is hard, even when you are not sure you will find it. That act of retrieval, of deliberately calling information up from memory, is the thing that actually strengthens learning. Every time you successfully pull a memory out, you make it easier to pull out again. To understand why this works, it helps to think about what a memory actually is. A memory is not a fixed recording, filed away and simply waiting to be read. It is more like a path through a forest. Each time you walk the path, you wear it a little deeper and clearer, making it easier to find and follow next time. Rereading is like standing at the entrance of the path and looking at it. It feels familiar, but it does not do much to wear the path deeper. Active recall is actually walking the path, from memory, without the map. It is harder, and sometimes you lose your way, but every time you make it through, the path becomes more permanent. Retrieval is the exercise that builds the muscle of memory. The research on this is remarkably consistent and, for many people, genuinely surprising. In study after study, learners who spend their time testing themselves, trying to recall the material, dramatically outperform learners who spend the same amount of time simply rereading, often by a wide margin, when they are tested later. And here is the truly counterintuitive part. The people who reread usually feel more confident. The rereading was smooth and comfortable, so they believe they have learned more. The people who tested themselves felt the friction of struggling to recall, so they often feel less confident, even though they have actually learned far more. The feeling of ease is misleading. The feeling of difficulty, within reason, is the sign that real learning is taking place. This is why active recall is such a powerful cheat code. It works with the grain of how memory is actually built, rather than against it, and it turns the uncomfortable act of struggling to remember from something we instinctively avoid into the very engine of learning. Once you understand this, you stop measuring your studying by how familiar the material feels and start measuring it by how well you can produce the material from an empty page. Putting it into practice is straightforward, and it can reshape everything about how you learn. After reading something you want to remember, close it and write down, from memory, everything you can recall. The blank page will show you, honestly and immediately, what you actually know and what only felt familiar. Turn your notes into questions rather than statements, and quiz yourself on them instead of rereading them. Use flashcards, which are simply active recall in physical form, a prompt on one side and a retrieval on the other. Before you look up an answer, always pause and try to remember it first, even for a moment, because that moment of reaching is where the strengthening happens. When you finish a chapter, look away and try to explain the main ideas out loud as if to someone else. There is a small discipline required here, because active recall asks you to sit with the discomfort of not knowing, at least for a moment, rather than reaching immediately for the reassurance of the answer. It asks you to be willing to fail a little, to draw a blank, to feel the effort of searching your own mind. That discomfort is precisely the point. It is the feeling of the path being worn deeper. The person who is willing to sit in that discomfort, to test themselves rather than merely review, learns faster and remembers longer than the person who takes the smooth and comfortable road of endless rereading. What makes this a true cheat code is that it costs nothing and requires no special tools, only a change in the direction of your effort, from pushing information in to pulling it back out. Most people never make this switch. They spend their lives rereading and reviewing, mistaking familiarity for knowledge, and wondering why so much of what they study seems to evaporate. The one who learns to test themselves instead has quietly changed the rules. They have discovered that the mind does not hold on to what it passively receives, but to what it actively retrieves, and that the surest way to remember something tomorrow is to practice, today, the simple and difficult act of calling it back to mind. Spaced repetition. Paced repetition. There is a quiet tragedy in the way most people study, and it is this: they do almost all of their learning at once, in a single concentrated burst, and then they let it fade. A student crams the night before an exam, holds the material in a fragile, trembling grip long enough to pass, and then watches it evaporate over the following days until almost nothing remains. The effort was real, the hours were real, and yet within a week most of it is gone. This is not a failure of intelligence or willpower. It is a failure of timing. And the cheat code that fixes it, quietly and completely, is called spaced repetition. The principle rests on one of the most reliable discoveries in all of psychology, something known as the forgetting curve. When you learn a new piece of information, your memory of it does not stay steady. It begins to fade almost immediately, dropping away quickly at first and then more slowly, until without any reinforcement it disappears. This fading is normal and universal. It is simply how memory behaves. But here is the crucial insight. Every time you review the information just as it is about to fade, you not only rescue it, you flatten the curve. The memory fades more slowly after each review, and the intervals at which you need to review it grow longer and longer. What began as something you had to revisit every day becomes something you need to revisit only every few days, then every few weeks, then every few months, and eventually almost never. This is the heart of the cheat code. Instead of reviewing something many times in a single sitting, which does surprisingly little, you spread those same reviews out across time, spacing them at expanding intervals. The same total amount of effort, distributed differently, produces a dramatically different result. Massed practice, all at once, feels productive but leads to rapid forgetting. Spaced practice, spread out, feels slower and less satisfying in the moment but leads to memory that lasts for years. You are not working harder. You are working in tune with the rhythm of how memory actually consolidates. Why does spacing work so powerfully? Part of the answer is that each time a memory has begun to fade and you successfully retrieve it anyway, the act of retrieval strengthens it far more than an easy review would. When you review something you learned 5 minutes ago, it is still fresh, so recalling it is effortless and does little. When you review something you learned 3 days ago, it has begun to slip, so recalling it requires real effort, and that effort deepens the memory. Spacing deliberately introduces this productive difficulty. It waits until the memory is just hard enough to retrieve, and that moment of slight struggle is exactly when the strengthening is greatest. The practical applications of this are enormous, and they extend far beyond passing exams. Anything you want to remember for the long term, a language, the names of people you meet, facts for your work, skills you are building, is best learned not in one heroic session but in short reviews spread across expanding intervals. Learn something today, Review it tomorrow, then a few days later, then a week later, then a month later. Each review takes only a little time, and together they build a memory that endures. This is why systems of flashcards that automatically schedule reviews at growing intervals are so effective. They are simply spaced repetition made systematic, showing you each item precisely when you are about to forget it and no sooner. There is a counterintuitive discipline required here, one that runs against a deep instinct. Spacing feels worse than cramming. When you space your practice, each review involves some forgetting and some struggle, and this makes you feel that you are not learning well. Cramming, by contrast, feels smooth and confident, because the material is fresh and easy. But the feeling is exactly backward. The smooth confidence of cramming precedes rapid forgetting, while the mild struggle of spacing precedes durable memory. Trusting this, choosing the method that feels worse but works better, is the small act of faith that spaced repetition asks of you. Understanding spaced repetition also changes how you think about time and learning. Most people treat learning as an event, a thing you do once and finish. Spaced repetition reveals it as a process that unfolds across time, a series of small, well-timed touches rather than a single grand effort. This is actually freeing, because it means you do not need marathon study sessions. A few minutes of review, placed at the right moments, accomplishes more than hours of cramming. The person who learns to space their practice can learn more, remember it far longer, and do so with less total effort than the person who piles everything into one exhausting session and then watches it fade. What makes this a true cheat code is that it asks nothing new of you except a change in when you do your reviewing. The effort is the same or less, only the timing changes. And yet that single change transforms fragile, fading knowledge into memory that lasts for years. Most people never make it. They cram, they forget, they cram again, forever refilling a bucket that leaks as fast as they pour. The one who learns to space their practice has quietly stopped the leak, discovering that memory is not built by piling everything on at once, but by returning, gently and at the right moments, again and again, until what was once fragile becomes permanent. The Feynman Technique. There is a particular kind of self-deception that almost everyone falls into, and it is one of the great obstacles to real understanding. We read something, we follow it as it goes by, we recognize each word and nod along, and we come away convinced that we understand it. But this feeling of understanding is often an illusion. We have understood the sentences as we read them, but we have not truly grasped the idea. And the proof comes the moment we try to explain it to someone else and find ourselves stumbling, reaching for words, discovering holes we did not know were there. The cheat code that cuts straight through this illusion is named after the physicist Richard Feynman, and it is called, simply, the Feynman Technique. The technique is built on a single powerful idea, that the truest test of understanding is the ability to explain something clearly and simply, in plain language, as if teaching it to someone who knows nothing about it. If you can do that, you genuinely understand it. If you cannot, you have found the exact edges of your own knowledge, the places where your understanding is really just memorized words covering a gap. Explaining, it turns out, is not merely a way of communicating what you already know. It is a way of discovering whether you know it at all, and of forcing yourself to actually understand it in the process. The method has a few simple steps. First, you choose the thing you want to understand and you try to explain it, out loud or on paper, in the simplest possible terms, as though you were teaching it to a child or a curious friend with no background in the subject. You avoid jargon and technical language, because jargon is often where fake understanding hides. It is easy to repeat a technical term without grasping what it means. As you explain, you will inevitably reach points where the explanation breaks down, where you cannot make it simple because you do not truly understand it. These breakdowns are not failures. They are the whole point. They show you precisely where your understanding is thin. Then comes the crucial second step. You go back to the source, to the book or the material, and you fill in exactly those gaps. Now your studying is targeted, aimed at the specific places where your explanation failed, rather than a vague rereading of everything. You learn what you need to make the explanation whole. Then you try to explain it again, simply, and you find the next gap, and you repeat the cycle until you can explain the whole thing smoothly, in plain words, without stumbling. When you can do that, you have not just memorized the material, you have understood it, deeply and durably. Why is this so powerful? Because explaining forces a kind of active, effortful processing that passive reading never demands. When you read, you can glide over difficulties without noticing them. When you explain, every difficulty stops you cold, because you cannot put into your own words something you do not understand. Explaining also forces you to organize the ideas, to see how they connect, to build a coherent structure rather than a loose pile of facts. And translating something into simple language requires you to grasp its essence, stripping away the complicated wording to find the core idea underneath. All of this builds an understanding far deeper than the shallow familiarity that reading produces. The technique also has a wonderful honesty to it. It is very difficult to fool yourself while explaining something simply. You either can or you cannot, and the moment you stumble, the illusion of understanding dissolves and the truth is laid bare. This is uncomfortable, because it reveals how much of what we think we know is actually just recognition, but it is enormously valuable, because it directs your effort exactly where it is needed. Most study time is wasted reviewing things we already know or vaguely rereading things we do not. The Feynman Technique aims your effort precisely at your real gaps. Putting it into practice requires only a willingness to talk to yourself, or to an imaginary student, and to be honest about where you falter. After learning something, close the book and try to teach it out loud in plain words. Notice where you get stuck or reach for jargon. Go back, learn those specific parts, and try again. You can even write the explanation as though it were a simple letter to a friend. The act of teaching, even to no one, transforms your understanding. There is a useful test hidden inside this. If your explanation is full of long, complicated words and technical phrases, be suspicious, because complexity is often where confusion hides. Genuine understanding tends to sound simple. It can be said in plain language because the person truly grasps the idea beneath the terminology. When you find yourself unable to simplify, unable to escape the jargon, you have found a place where you are leaning on borrowed words instead of your own understanding. The struggle to make something simple is the struggle to actually understand it, and winning that struggle is exactly what deep learning feels like. What makes this a genuine cheat code is that it converts the ordinary act of explaining into a precision instrument for building and testing understanding. Most people never use it. They read, they nod, they mistake recognition for knowledge, and they are surprised later by how little they can actually do with what they studied. The one who learns to explain simply has a way of always knowing exactly what they truly understand and what they only think they do, and of turning the second into the first. In teaching, even an imaginary student, they teach themselves, and they discover the old truth that we never understand something so well as when we have had to make it clear to someone else. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this calm journey and the quiet ideas we explore together, consider subscribing to Nightmind Academy, so you can return here anytime you need a peaceful space to unwind and drift into sleep. Interleaving. Imagine two people learning to solve a set of different types of problems, or to master a handful of related skills. The first practices the way almost everyone does, and the way that feels most sensible. They work on one type until they have it down, then move to the next type and drill that, then the next, tackling each in its own solid block. The second does something that feels messier and less comfortable. They mix the types together, switching from one to another and back again, never staying on a single type for long. Common sense says the first person, with their neat and focused blocks, should learn better. But common sense is wrong. The second person, the one who mixes things up, will almost always end up with the deeper, more flexible, more lasting mastery. This is the cheat code called interleaving. Interleaving means mixing different topics, types, or skills within a single practice session, rather than practicing each one separately in its own block. Instead of doing all of one kind of problem, then all of another, you shuffle them together, so that each problem is different from the last. It feels harder and more disjointed, and that is precisely why it works. The blocked approach, doing many of the same thing in a row, feels smooth and produces a comforting sense of fluency, but that fluency is shallow and fades. The interleaved approach feels choppy and difficult, but it builds understanding that is genuinely stronger and that transfers far better to real situations. To see why, consider what blocked practice actually trains. When you do 20 of the same type of problem in a row, you quickly fall into a groove. After the first few, you already know what kind of problem it is and which method to use, so you are really just repeating the same procedure again and again, almost on autopilot. You never have to face the crucial question that real situations always demand. Which kind of problem is this, and which approach does it call for? Blocked practice hands you that answer for free, so you never learn to figure it out yourself. Then, when you face a mix of problems in the real world or on a test, you are lost, because you practiced executing methods but never practiced choosing them. Interleaving fixes exactly this. When the problems are mixed, each one forces you to first recognize what kind of problem it is before you can solve it, and this act of discrimination, of telling one type from another and selecting the right approach, is a huge part of real skill. Interleaving trains that discrimination directly. It also brings a hidden benefit. Because you keep leaving a topic and coming back to it, interleaving naturally builds in the spacing and retrieval that strengthen memory. Each time you return to a type of problem, you have partly forgotten it, so you must retrieve the method afresh, and that retrieval deepens the learning. The evidence for interleaving is striking, and like so many of these cheat codes, it comes with a twist about how it feels. In studies, learners who interleave their practice often perform worse during practice itself, making more mistakes, feeling more confused, and reporting that they feel they are learning less. Yet when tested later, they dramatically outperform the learners who used comfortable blocked practice. And revealingly, even the interleavers often believed the blocked method worked better for them, because it felt so much smoother, even though the results prove otherwise. Once again, the feeling of ease is a poor guide to actual learning, and the mild struggle of the harder method is the signature of deeper progress. Interleaving applies far beyond academic problems. A musician practicing several pieces or techniques does better to rotate among them than to drill each one to exhaustion in turn. An athlete practicing different skills benefits from mixing them rather than blocking them. Anyone learning to categorize or distinguish things, to tell one style, one type, one case from another, benefits from seeing them shuffled together rather than sorted into tidy groups. Wherever the real challenge involves not just performing a skill but choosing the right one for the situation, interleaving builds exactly the ability that matters. Putting it into practice means deliberately resisting the urge to tidy your learning into neat blocks. Mix your problem types together. Rotate among the skills or topics you are practicing rather than finishing one before starting the next. Tolerate the feeling of choppiness and the extra mistakes, knowing that they are the price of a deeper and more transferable mastery. It will feel less satisfying in the moment, and you must trust the outcome over the feeling. A simple picture captures why this matters. Imagine learning to recognize the work of several different painters. If you study one painter's work in a long block, then the next in another block, you will feel you know each style well by the end of its block. But shuffle their paintings together, and something harder and better happens. You are forced, each time, to notice what actually distinguishes one painter from another, and it is that noticing that lets you recognize a new, unfamiliar painting later. Blocked study teaches you to recognize a block. Interleaving teaches you to recognize the world, which never arrives sorted into blocks at all. What makes interleaving a true cheat code is that it costs nothing but a rearrangement of the order in which you practice, and yet it transforms shallow, fading fluency into flexible, durable skill. Most people never do it, because the neat and comfortable path of blocked practice feels so obviously right. The one who learns to mix things up has quietly traded a pleasant feeling for a real result, discovering that the mind learns to tell things apart, and to choose wisely among them, not when they arrive in tidy rows, but when they come, as life always sends them, shuffled together and out of order. The Zeigarnik Effect. Have you ever noticed how a task you have finished tends to vanish cleanly from your mind, while a task you left unfinished seems to nag at you, returning again and again, refusing to be forgotten? An unanswered message, an unfinished project, a conversation left hanging. These things have a strange power to linger in the mind, tugging at your attention when you would rather think of something else. This is not a personal quirk or a sign of an anxious temperament. It is a well-documented feature of how the mind works, discovered by a psychologist named Bloomer Zeigarnik, and it carries within it a genuine cheat code. It is called the Zeigarnik Effect. The mind holds on to unfinished tasks far more strongly than finished ones. The effect was first noticed in an ordinary setting. Zeigarnik observed that waiters could remember the details of orders that were still in progress, unpaid and unfinished, with remarkable accuracy. Yet once an order was completed and settled, the details seemed to drop out of their memory almost immediately. Curious, she studied this systematically and found a consistent pattern. People remember interrupted or unfinished tasks better than completed ones. When a task is left open, the mind keeps a kind of active tension around it, holding it in a state of readiness, continuing to devote attention to it beneath the surface. When the task is completed, that tension is released, and the mind lets it go. On its face, this sounds like a nuisance, and indeed the nagging of unfinished tasks can be a real source of mental clutter and stress. But hidden inside the effect are two powerful ways to use it deliberately, to turn a quirk of the mind into a tool. The first has to do with beginning. One of the greatest obstacles to any large task is simply starting it, and once we have not started, the task sits in the mind as a vague, heavy weight. But the Zeigarnik Effect tells us something useful. The moment you begin a task, even a little, even for a few minutes, you open it, and your mind will begin to hold on to it, to work on it beneath the surface, to keep it active. Starting, however small the start, engages the mind's tendency to keep unfinished business alive. This is why the simple act of beginning is so much more powerful than we expect. If you sit down and work on a daunting task for just a few minutes and then stop, you have not merely done a few minutes of work. You have opened a loop that your mind will now keep returning to, mulling over, making progress on even while you are away from it. The task that felt inert and impossible becomes active and alive in your mind the moment you begin. This is the opposite of procrastination's trap, in which the unstarted task looms untouched. Begin, and the Zeigarnik Effect starts working for you, keeping the task turning quietly in the back of your mind. This reframes the whole problem of getting started. We usually treat starting as though it required the same energy as finishing, and so we wait until we feel ready to do the whole thing. But you do not need to be ready to finish. You need only to be ready to begin, and beginning can be almost trivially small. Open the document and write one sentence. Take out the materials and do one step. That tiny beginning is enough to switch the task from closed and inert to open and humming. And from that point, the mind's own machinery keeps it alive without your having to force it. The second use has to do with stopping in the right place. There is an old piece of advice, followed by many writers, to end each working session not at a natural stopping point but in the middle of something, mid-sentence, mid-thought, at a place where you know exactly what comes next. This feels strange, because we instinctively want to finish a section cleanly before we stop. But stopping midstream leaves the task deliberately unfinished, and the Zeigarnik Effect ensures that your mind will keep it active, so that when you return, you're not facing a blank and closed task but an open, humming one that you are eager to continue. The unfinished state pulls you back in and eases the difficulty of resuming. Understanding the Zeigarnik Effect also helps explain and manage the mental clutter of modern life. The reason a long list of unfinished tasks can feel so draining is that each open loop occupies a little of the mind's attention, and many open loops together create a constant background hum of tension. This suggests a remedy. Getting unfinished tasks out of your head and onto a trusted list can actually quiet the mind. Studies suggest that simply making a concrete plan for an unfinished task can release the mental tension it creates, even before the task is done, because the mind treats a clear plan almost as a kind of closure. The open loop is soothed not only by finishing, but by having a definite plan to finish. So the Zeigarnik Effect offers a double cheat code. To overcome the inertia of not starting, simply begin, and let the mind's grip on the unfinished pull you forward. To make returning to work easy, stop in the middle rather than at the end, leaving a loop open and humming. And to quiet the drain of too many open loops, write them down and make plans for them, giving the mind the sense of closure it craves. Most people are ruled by this effect without knowing it, nagged by their unfinished business and blocked by their unstarted tasks. The one who understands it can turn it around, using the mind's own stubborn grip on the incomplete as a quiet engine for starting, for returning, and for finally finding peace. The memory palace. There are people who can memorize the order of a shuffled deck of cards in minutes, or recall hundreds of random words, or hold vast strings of numbers in their minds. And when you learn how they do it, you discover something surprising. They are almost never people born with extraordinary memories. They are ordinary people using an ancient technique, one known for thousands of years, that works with the natural strengths of the human mind rather than against them. The technique is called the memory palace, or the method of Loki, and it is perhaps the most powerful memory cheat code ever devised. The insight behind it begins with a simple observation about what human memory is naturally good at and what it is naturally bad at. We are remarkably poor at remembering abstract things, lists of words, strings of numbers, dry facts in isolation. But we are astonishingly good at remembering two other kinds of things: places and images. Think of a house you lived in long ago. You can almost certainly walk through it in your mind, room by room, recalling the layout with ease. And a single vivid, strange image can lodge in your memory for years without any effort at all. The memory palace works by taking the abstract things we struggle to remember and attaching them to the places and images we remember effortlessly. Here is how it works. You choose a place you know well, your home, a familiar route, a building you can picture clearly. This becomes your memory palace. Then you take the things you want to remember and you turn each one into a vivid, memorable image, and you place those images, one by one, at specific locations along a path through your palace. To recall the information later, you simply take a mental walk through the palace, moving from location to location, and at each spot you find the image you placed there, waiting for you. Because you can easily walk the familiar route, and because the vivid images are easy to recall, the abstract information rides along, anchored to places and pictures your mind holds without effort. Suppose you want to remember a list of items. A shopping list, say. You might imagine walking through your front door and finding a giant loaf of bread blocking the entrance, so large you have to squeeze past it. In the hallway, you picture a river of milk pouring down the stairs. In the kitchen, a bunch of bananas dressed up and dancing on the table. Each image is strange, vivid, even absurd, because the stranger and more striking the image, the more firmly it sticks. Then, to recall your list, you walk the route in your mind, and at each place the images are there, and from them you read off the items. What was an abstract list has become a memorable journey. The reason this works so well is that it recruits several of the mind's deepest strengths at once. Spatial memory, our memory for places, is ancient and powerful, rooted in our ancestors' need to navigate the world. Visual memory, our memory for images, is likewise strong and effortless. By converting abstract information into vivid images and anchoring them in a spatial journey, the memory palace lets you store almost anything using the very systems the mind is best at. It also gives the information structure and order. Because the images sit at specific places along a path, you recall them in sequence, without losing or scrambling them. The technique is genuinely ancient. Orators in the classical world, who had to deliver long speeches from memory without notes, used memory palaces to hold the structure and content of their speeches, placing the parts of the speech at locations in an imagined building and walking through it as they spoke. For thousands of years, before printing made written notes cheap and easy, trained memory was a prized skill, and the memory palace was its central method. Today, the champions of memory competitions use the very same technique, proving that it is not a relic but a living tool of extraordinary power. Putting it into practice takes a little effort at first, but it is a skill anyone can learn. Choose a place you know intimately. Decide on a clear path through it, a fixed order of locations. Turn what you want to remember into vivid, exaggerated, even ridiculous images, because vividness is what makes them stick. Place them along your path, one per location. Then walk the path in your mind to review and to recall. With practice, the process becomes fast and natural, and you can build many palaces for many purposes. A few small principles make the images stick even better. Make them move, because motion is more memorable than stillness. Make them exaggerated in size, absurd in behavior, even a little shocking, because the mind clings to what is strange and lets go of what is ordinary. Involve yourself in the scene, imagining that you can hear it, smell it, feel it, because the more senses an image touches, the more firmly it lodges. A quiet, sensible picture will fade. A loud, ridiculous, multisensory one will wait for you at its spot for years. The palace rewards imagination, and the stranger you are willing to be inside it, the more it gives back. What makes the memory palace a true cheat code is that it does not require better memory. It requires only that you use the memory you already have in the way it is naturally strong. Most people struggle to memorize abstract things and conclude they simply have bad memories. The one who learns to build memory palaces discovers that the mind's capacity was never the problem, only the method. By turning the abstract into the vivid, and the vivid into a journey through a familiar place, they unlock a power that has lived, quietly waiting, inside ordinary human memory all along. Sleep on it. We tend to think of sleep as time subtracted from life, a necessary shutdown during which nothing useful happens, a blank interruption we would skip if only we could. This picture could hardly be more wrong. Sleep is one of the most active and important periods for the brain, and among the many things it does while we rest, one stands out as a genuine cheat code for the mind. Sleep is when the brain consolidates memory, taking the fragile experiences and learning of the day and locking them into lasting form. To learn something and then sleep on it is not to pause your learning but to complete it. The night finishes the work the day began. During the day, When you learn something new, the memory is formed, but it is initially fragile, held in a delicate and temporary state, vulnerable to being lost. What happens during sleep is that the brain replays and reorganizes these fresh memories, transferring them from that fragile temporary storage into more stable, long-term form, weaving them into the existing web of what you already know. This process, called consolidation, is not a minor housekeeping task. It is essential. Without the sleep that follows learning, much of what you learned would remain fragile and would fade. The memory is planted during the day, but it takes root during the night. The evidence for this is extensive and consistent. People who sleep after learning something remember it markedly better than people who stay awake for the same period. This holds for many kinds of learning, facts, skills, and more. A skill practiced and then slept on is often performed better the next day, even without further practice, as though the brain refined it overnight. Information studied and then slept on is retained far better than information studied and then kept awake. The improvement is real and measurable, and it comes not from more effort but simply from allowing sleep to do its work after the learning is done. Different stages of sleep appear to serve different roles in this consolidation. Deep sleep seems especially important for consolidating facts and information, the kind of memory you can state and recall. The dreaming stage of sleep appears to play a special role in consolidating skills and in weaving memories together, integrating new learning with old, and finding connections. This is part of why a full night of sleep, moving through all its stages, matters so much. The different phases each contribute their part to locking in and organizing what you have learned. Cutting sleep short does not merely leave you tired, it robs you of the very processes that would have made your learning stick. Sleep does more than simply preserve memories, though. It also seems to process and reorganize them in ways that can produce genuine insight. There is deep truth in the old advice to sleep on a problem. When you are stuck on something and cannot see the answer, sleep often helps, and not merely by resting you. During sleep, the brain reorganizes information and forges new connections, and people frequently wake with solutions, insights, or fresh perspectives that eluded them the night before. Studies have shown that people are more likely to discover a hidden pattern or solve a problem after a night of sleep than after an equal time awake. The sleeping brain, freed from the narrow focus of waking thought, seems to find links the waking mind could not. There is a caution folded inside this cheat code, and it is an important one. Because sleep is when learning is consolidated, cutting sleep short in order to study more is often self-defeating. The student who stays up all night cramming may cover more material, but by sacrificing sleep, they sabotage the very process that would have locked that material into memory, and they face the next day with a tired, impaired brain besides. It is frequently better to study somewhat less and sleep fully than to study more and sleep little. The all-nighter feels virtuous and productive, but it trades away the consolidation that makes learning last. Putting this cheat code into practice is refreshingly simple, because it asks you to do something restful rather than effortful. Learn or practice something, and then protect your sleep, allowing a full night for the brain to consolidate what you have taken in. Review important material shortly before sleeping, when it can feed directly into the night's consolidation. Never routinely sacrifice sleep for more study or work, because you are likely giving up more than you gain. And when you are stuck on a hard problem, genuinely try sleeping on it, trusting the reorganizing power of the sleeping brain. There is a gentle reframing hidden in all of this that can change how you feel about rest itself. Many people carry a low, nagging guilt about sleep, treating every hour of it as an hour stolen from more important things. But if sleep is where learning is completed, where skills are refined and problems quietly solved, then sleep is not the opposite of productivity. It is part of it. To sleep well after a day of learning is not laziness but the finishing of the work. Seen this way, protecting your sleep becomes not an indulgence to feel guilty about but a responsibility to the very things you're trying to learn and become. What makes this a true cheat code is that it turns rest itself into a tool, revealing that the brain keeps working on your behalf even when you have stopped. Most people treat sleep as the enemy of productivity, something to minimize in the pursuit of doing more. The one who understands the sleeping brain does the opposite, using sleep deliberately as the final, essential step of learning. They plant the seeds during the day and then, instead of anxiously digging them up, they rest and let the quiet work of the night bring the learning to root. Implementation intentions. Almost everyone knows the strange, deflating experience of making a sincere resolution and then simply not following through. You decide, with real conviction, that you will exercise more, or write every day, or eat better, or call an old friend. The intention is genuine. And yet, somehow, the days pass and it does not happen. It is not that you changed your mind. It is that the moment to act kept arriving and slipping past without your quite noticing, until the whole resolution quietly dissolved. The problem is not a lack of desire. It is a lack of a plan specific enough to survive contact with real life. And the cheat code that closes this gap is deceptively simple. It is called an implementation intention. The idea comes from research by the psychologist Peter Gollwitzer, and it turns on a small but powerful shift in how you frame a goal. A goal is a statement of what you want. I will exercise more. An implementation intention is a statement of exactly when, where, and how you will act, written in a specific if-then form. If it is 7 in the morning, then I will put on my shoes and walk for 20 minutes. You are not merely deciding what you want to achieve. You are deciding, in advance, the precise situation that will trigger the precise action. You link a concrete cue to a concrete behavior, so that when the cue arrives, the action is already prepared and waiting. Why does this small change make such a large difference? Because much of the failure to follow through happens not from weakness of will but from a kind of blindness in the moment. When you have only a vague goal, you must, each time, notice that an opportunity to act has arrived, decide whether to act now, figure out exactly what to do, and summon the initiative to do it, all in real time, often while tired or busy or distracted. That is a lot to ask, and usually the moment simply passes unrecognized. An implementation intention does the deciding in advance, when you are calm and clear, so that in the moment there is nothing to figure out. The situation arises, and the pre-planned response fires almost automatically. In effect, you are preloading a decision. You are handing your future self, who will be tired and distracted, a simple instruction that requires no thought. When this happens, do that. Research shows that this works remarkably well. Across many studies, people who form specific if-then plans are substantially more likely to follow through on their goals than people who hold the same goals without such plans. The effect appears for exercise, for healthy eating, for studying, for all sorts of intentions. The goal provides the motivation. The implementation intention provides the mechanism that turns motivation into action. The power lies in the specificity. A vague plan, I will exercise this week, gives the mind nothing to catch hold of, no definite moment to trigger the act. A specific plan, on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, as soon as I wake up, I will exercise for 20 minutes in my living room, ties the action to unmistakable cues of time and place. When Monday morning arrives, the cue is there, and the action is already decided. You are far more likely to act, because you are not relying on noticing an opportunity and deciding in the moment. You are simply following a plan that the moment itself triggers. Implementation intentions are also powerful for handling obstacles. And this is a use people often overlook. You can plan not only your desired actions, but your responses to the things that tend to derail you. If a craving strikes, then I will drink a glass of water and wait 10 minutes. If I feel the urge to check my phone while working, then I will put it in another room. By deciding in advance how you will respond to temptations and obstacles, you prepare yourself for the difficult moments before they arrive, so that when they come, you're not improvising a defense under pressure but executing a plan you already made in calm. Putting this cheat code into practice means taking your vague goals and translating each one into a specific if-then plan. Do not simply resolve to do something. Decide exactly when and where you will do it, and write it in the form, if this situation occurs, then I will do this action. Choose cues that are concrete and reliable, tied to a specific time, place, or event that will definitely happen. For each temptation that tends to trip you up, prepare an if-then response in advance. The more specific and concrete your plans, the more reliably they will fire when their moment comes. It is worth noticing how little effort this actually takes compared to how much it changes. Forming an implementation intention costs a single minute of thought. You decide the cue, you decide the action, you join them. That 1 minute, spent in advance, spares you the far greater and repeated cost of deciding in the moment, again and again, whether and how to act. You are trading a small, calm act of planning for a large, exhausting series of in-the-moment struggles. And the trade is enormously in your favor. What makes this a true cheat code is that it requires no extra willpower, no greater desire, only a change in how precisely you plan. Most people fail at their goals not because they want them too little, but because they leave the crucial details, when and where and how, unspecified. And so the moment of action never quite crystallizes. The one who forms clear implementation intentions has quietly removed the need to decide in the moment, wiring the desired action directly to the situations that trigger it. They have learned that a wish becomes a deed not through the force of resolve, but through the clarity of a plan specific enough that the world itself reminds you to act. The 2-minute rule. There is a particular kind of paralysis that steals more of our lives than we realize, and it lives in the gap between deciding to do something and actually beginning it. The task sits before us, and it feels large, or unpleasant, or simply effortful, and so we do not start. We wait for motivation, for the right mood, for a better moment, and the task swells in our imagination until starting it feels like lifting a great weight. The cheat code that dissolves this paralysis is almost laughably small, and that is exactly the source of its power. It is called the 2-minute rule, and it comes in 2 complementary forms, each useful in its own way. The first form addresses small tasks and the clutter of little undone things. It says simply this: if a task will take less than about 2 minutes, do it immediately, rather than putting it off. Answer the quick message now. Put the dish in the dishwasher now. File the paper, send a short reply, make the brief note, right now. The reasoning is that small tasks, when deferred, do not really get smaller. They pile up, and worse, they occupy the mind, each one a small open loop nagging for attention, and the mental cost of remembering and redeciding them again and again far exceeds the tiny cost of just doing them at once. By handling anything under 2 minutes on the spot, you keep these small things from accumulating into an overwhelming mass, and you keep your mind clear of their constant low hum. The second form of the rule is aimed at large tasks, and it is subtler and, in a way, more profound. It says, when you want to build a new habit or begin a daunting task, scale it down until it takes only 2 minutes to start. Do not resolve to write a book. Resolve to write 1 sentence. Do not resolve to do a full workout. Resolve to put on your workout clothes. Do not resolve to meditate for an hour. Resolve to take 1 slow breath. The 2-minute version is so small that it is almost impossible to refuse. and refusing to start is precisely the barrier that stops us. By making the entry point tiny, you slip past the resistance that guards the beginning. The genius of this second form lies in a truth about how action works. Starting is the hardest part, and once you have started, continuing is far easier. The resistance we feel is almost all concentrated at the threshold, in the moment before we begin. Once we are moving, momentum takes over, and often we continue well past the 2 minutes we committed to, because the hard part, the starting, is already behind us. You told yourself you would write one sentence, and having written it, you find yourself writing a paragraph, then a page. You told yourself you would just put on your shoes, and having done so, you find yourself going for the walk. The 2 minutes was never really the goal. It was the doorway. But here is the important subtlety. Even on the days when you do not continue, when you write only the single sentence or take only the single breath and then stop, the 2-minute rule has still done something vital. It has kept the habit alive. It has cast a vote for the identity of a person who writes, who exercises, who meditates. Showing up in the smallest possible way, on the hard days, preserves the chain and the sense of yourself as someone who does this thing, and that continuity matters more over time than any single day's volume. The rule ensures you almost never fully break the habit, because the bar to keep it going is so low that you can clear it even at your worst. This connects to a deeper principle about how habits truly form. We tend to believe habits are built through large efforts, but they are built far more through consistency, through showing up again and again, however small the showing up. A habit performed tiny but daily takes root more surely than one attempted hugely but sporadically. The 2-minute rule is, in essence, a tool for consistency, for making the habit so easy to perform that you can do it every day, in any mood, under any circumstances, so that it becomes woven into who you are before you ever scale it up. Putting it into practice is straightforward and immediately useful. For small tasks, adopt the habit of doing anything that takes under 2 minutes right away, rather than deferring it. For new habits and daunting tasks, define a 2-minute version, a starting action so small you cannot talk yourself out of it, and commit only to that. Let continuing be a welcome bonus rather than the requirement. On easy days you will sail past the 2 minutes. On hard days you will do the tiny version and keep the chain intact. Either way, you win. What makes this a true cheat code is that it defeats resistance not by overpowering it, but by shrinking the task beneath the level at which resistance bothers to appear. Most people wait to feel ready to do the whole thing, and so they wait forever. The one who masters the 2-minute rule stops trying to summon the will for the whole task and simply makes the beginning trivially small, trusting momentum to carry the rest and consistency to build the habit. They have learned the quiet secret that you do not have to feel like doing something in order to begin it, and that beginning, however small, is very nearly everything. Temptation bundling. We all have 2 kinds of activities in our lives, and they are usually at war with each other. There are the things we know we should do but do not want to, the workout, the boring report, the tedious chore, and there are the things we want to do but often feel we should not, or at least should not do so much, scrolling through our phones, watching our favorite shows, listening to guilty-pleasure entertainment. The usual approach is to try to force ourselves toward the first kind through sheer willpower while denying ourselves the second kind out of discipline. But there is a cleverer way, a cheat code that resolves the war by joining the 2 sides together. It is called temptation bundling. The idea, studied by the researcher Catherine Milkman, is simple and elegant. You bundle a thing you should do but tend to avoid together with a thing you want to do but perhaps overindulge in, allowing yourself the tempting activity only while you are doing the beneficial one. You let yourself watch your favorite show only while exercising. You let yourself listen to the addictive podcast only while doing chores. You enjoy the fancy coffee only while working through the tedious task. The temptation becomes the reward that pulls you into the activity you would otherwise resist, and the two, bundled together, become something you actually look forward to. The beauty of this is that it transforms the emotional character of both activities at once. The task you dreaded becomes bearable, even pleasant, because it now comes packaged with something you enjoy. You start to look forward to the workout because it is when you get to watch your show. And the guilty pleasure loses its guilt, because it is now attached to something good. You can enjoy the show freely, without the nagging sense that you should be doing something more worthwhile, because you are doing something worthwhile at the very same time. Two problems solve each other. The unpleasant becomes attractive, and the indulgent becomes productive. Why does this work so well? Because it addresses motivation at its root rather than fighting it. Willpower, the brute force of making yourself do what you do not want to do, is limited and exhausting, and relying on it means every session is a battle. Temptation bundling sidesteps the battle entirely by making the beneficial activity genuinely desirable in the moment. You are no longer forcing yourself toward the gym against your own inclination. You are drawn there by the pull of the reward waiting inside it. The motivation to do the good thing borrows its energy from the pull of the tempting thing, and that pull is often far stronger than any resolve. There is a further, subtler benefit. Many of our tempting activities are things we would do anyway, often more than we should, and often in ways that leave us feeling a little worse afterward, hours lost to aimless scrolling or binge-watching. Temptation bundling channels that pull towards something constructive. Instead of the temptation being a leak through which time and energy drain away, it becomes a current that drives a useful wheel. You are going to watch the show regardless. By tying it to the treadmill, you convert an idle pleasure into an engine of exercise. The same appetite that used to work against your goals is put to work in their service. The technique does require a little honesty and a little discipline of a particular kind, the discipline of the boundary rather than the grind. The bundle works only if you actually reserve the tempting activity for the bundled occasions, so that it retains its pull. If you let yourself watch the show anytime, it loses its power to draw you to the gym. The discipline is not in forcing the hard activity but in protecting the reward, keeping the treat special by tying it to the task. This is a far lighter discipline than raw willpower, a single rule to hold rather than a constant battle to wage. Putting it into practice begins with two lists: the beneficial activities you tend to avoid, and the tempting activities you enjoy, perhaps too much. Then you look for good pairings, matching an avoided task with a temptation that fits it, something you can genuinely enjoy while doing the task, or immediately alongside it. Reserve that temptation for that bundle. The best pairings are ones where the two activities can happen at the same time, the show and the workout, the podcast and the chores. But even bundling a treat as an immediate reward tied strictly to the task can work. It helps to think of each bundle as a small standing appointment between duty and pleasure. Once the pairing is set, you no longer negotiate with yourself each day about whether to do the hard thing. The pull of the treat quietly makes the case for you. And because the treat is now reserved, it regains a freshness it may have lost through overuse, so that the thing you enjoy becomes, once again, genuinely something to look forward to rather than a hollow habit. The bundle gives the pleasure back its sparkle even as it puts that sparkle to work. What makes temptation bundling a true cheat code is that it stops treating motivation as a matter of forcing yourself and starts treating it as a matter of design, arranging things so that you want to do what is good for you. Most people spend their lives in a draining tug-of-war, whipping themselves toward their duties and scolding themselves for their pleasures. The one who learns to bundle temptations lays down the whip and simply redesigns the arrangement, tying the pull of pleasure to the wheel of progress, so that the very appetites that once pulled them off course now carry them forward, and the things they should do and the things they want to do finally, cleverly, point in the same direction. Habit stacking. Every day, without any effort or decision, you perform dozens of well-established habits. You brush your teeth, you make your coffee, you sit down at your desk, you lock the door on your way out. These habits run almost automatically, triggered by the situations in which they are embedded, requiring no willpower and little thought. They are, in a sense, solid ground, the reliable and automatic structure of your day. And this solid ground is exactly what makes possible one of the most practical cheat codes for building new habits, a technique called habit stacking, attaching a new habit you want to build onto an existing habit you already have. The problem with new habits is that they have no natural trigger. An established habit fires because it is cued by a reliable moment: waking up, finishing a meal, arriving home. A new habit, by contrast, floats unanchored. There is no built-in moment that reminds you to do it, so you forget, or you never quite find the time, and it fails to take root. Habit stacking solves this by borrowing the trigger of an existing habit. You take a habit you already perform reliably and you use its completion as the cue for the new habit, forming a chain. After I do this thing I already do, I will do this new thing I want to build. The formula is simple and specific. After I do X, I will do Y, where X is a current habit and Y is the new one. After I pour my morning coffee, I will write down one thing I am grateful for. After I sit down at my desk, I will review my top task for the day. After I take off my work shoes, I will change into my exercise clothes. The existing habit becomes the reliable trigger that reminds you to perform the new one, so you no longer have to remember it or find a slot for it. It rides on the back of something already automatic, cued into being at a moment that reliably arrives. Why is this so effective? Because it solves the two great problems of new habits at once: remembering to do them and finding a place for them. By anchoring the new habit to an existing one, you ensure it has a definite, reliable cue, so you will not forget it, and a definite place in your day, so you will not fail to fit it in. You are not trying to insert a new behavior into the vague open space of your day, where it easily gets lost. You are slotting it into a precise moment in an existing sequence, where the preceding habit ushers it in. The old habit does the work of reminding, and the new habit simply follows. Over time, something lovely happens. As the new habit is performed again and again, always in the same place, triggered by the same cue, it begins to become automatic itself, part of the chain, so that eventually it fires as effortlessly as the habit it was stacked upon. And once it is established, it can in turn become the anchor for yet another new habit, stacked on top of it. In this way, you can gradually build up whole sequences of good habits, each one triggering the next, a smooth chain of behaviors that flows almost by itself, constructed one link at a time on the foundation of what you already reliably do. There are a few keys to doing this well. The anchor habit should be something you truly do reliably every single time, so that the cue is dependable. The new habit should, at least at first, be small, so that it slots easily into the moment after the anchor without disrupting the flow of your day. And the pairing should make sense, the new habit fitting naturally into the time and place where the anchor occurs, so that there is no awkward mismatch. A well-chosen stack feels smooth, one thing leading naturally into the next. A poorly chosen one feels forced and tends to fall apart. It also helps to be precise about the exact moment of the trigger. Rather than a vague after breakfast, choose a specific, unmistakable action, such as after I put my coffee cup down on the counter. The sharper and more concrete the cue, the more reliably it fires, because there is a single clear instant that says now. Vague anchors blur into the day and are easy to miss. Sharp ones act like a small bell that rings at exactly the right moment, calling the new habit into being. The more clearly you can point to the instant of the trigger, the more dependable the whole stack becomes. Putting it into practice begins with taking an inventory of the habits and routines you already perform automatically throughout your day, the reliable fixed points. Then, for each new habit you want to build, you find a suitable anchor among them and form the specific "after I do X I will do Y" statement. You start small, you keep the pairing natural, and you let the existing habit carry the new one into being, day after day, until the new one stands on its own. Then, if you wish, you stack again. What makes habit stacking a true cheat code is that it builds new behavior not on the shaky ground of memory and willpower, but on the solid ground of habits you already have, letting your existing routines do the work of triggering the new ones. Most people try to add new habits by floating them in the open air of good intentions, where they drift away. The one who learns to stack habits anchors each new behavior to something already automatic, so that it is reminded into existence at exactly the right moment, and gradually, link by link, they build the structure of the life they want on the foundation of the life they already live. Designing out friction. Assigning out friction. We like to believe that our behavior is driven mainly by our intentions, our values, our willpower, that we do what we do because we have decided to. But a great deal of research, and a little honest observation, reveals a humbler truth. Much of what we do is shaped less by our grand intentions than by the small, often invisible details of how easy or hard each option is to perform. We tend, again and again, to do whatever is easiest in the moment and to avoid whatever requires even a little extra effort. This tendency can seem like a weakness, but it hides a powerful cheat code. If behavior follows the path of least resistance, then you can change your behavior by changing where the resistance lies, a practice we can call designing out friction. Friction is the sum of the small obstacles, the little bits of effort, that stand between you and an action. It is the number of steps, the amount of hassle, the physical and mental effort required to begin. And it turns out that even tiny amounts of friction have an outsized effect on what we actually do. A slightly inconvenient healthy option often loses to a slightly convenient unhealthy one. A good habit that requires several steps to begin is done far less often than one that requires none. We imagine that if we want something enough, a little inconvenience will not stop us. But in practice, small frictions steer our behavior far more than we would like to admit. The cheat code, then, works in two directions at once. To do more of a good behavior, reduce the friction around it, make it easier, remove steps, prepare in advance, put the necessary things within easy reach, so that beginning requires as little effort as possible. To do less of a bad behavior, increase the friction around it, add steps, create small obstacles, put the tempting thing out of easy reach, so that indulging requires more effort than before. You are not relying on willpower to overcome friction in the moment. You are rearranging the friction ahead of time so that the easy path and the good path become the same path. Consider how small these adjustments can be, and yet how much they matter. If you want to exercise in the morning, lay out your workout clothes the night before, so that beginning requires no searching or deciding. You have removed friction. If you want to eat more fruit, wash it and place it in a bowl in plain sight, so that it is the easiest thing to grab, friction removed. On the other side, if you want to check your phone less, leave it in another room, so that reaching for it requires getting up and walking, friction added. If you want to snack less, keep the snacks in an inconvenient place, out of sight and out of easy reach, friction added. Each change is trivial in itself, yet together such changes reshape behavior powerfully. The deep insight here is that your environment is not a neutral backdrop to your choices. It is an active force shaping them, moment by moment, through the friction it imposes. The arrangement of your space, the placement of objects, the number of steps between you and each option, all of these quietly tilt your behavior one way or another. Most people leave this arrangement to chance and then rely on willpower to fight against whatever their environment happens to encourage. Designing out friction reverses this, treating the environment as something to be deliberately arranged so that it encourages the behavior you want and discourages the behavior you do not. This approach has a special kind of gentleness to it, because it does not depend on being strong in the moment of temptation, which is precisely when we are weakest. Instead, it works by making decisions in advance, when you are calm and clear, arranging things so that the moment of temptation is easier to navigate or does not arise at all. It is far easier to not buy the tempting food at the store, a single decision made calmly, than to resist it 100 times in your kitchen. It is far easier to set up your environment once to support a habit than to force the habit against an unsupportive environment every single day. You do the hard thinking once, and then the environment does the work. Putting this into practice means looking honestly at the behaviors you want more of and less of, and then examining the friction around each. For the good behaviors, ask what small obstacles you can remove, what you can prepare in advance, what you can place within easy reach, to make beginning nearly effortless. For the bad behaviors, ask what small obstacles you can add, what you can move out of reach, what steps you can insert, to make indulging just inconvenient enough. Then rearrange your environment accordingly, and let it quietly steer you. What makes this a true cheat code is that it stops treating behavior as a contest of willpower and starts treating it as a matter of design, recognizing that the easiest path is the one most often taken and then arranging things so that the easiest path is the good one. Most people fight their environments, relying on effort to overcome the friction their surroundings impose. The one who learns to design out friction stops fighting and starts arranging, shaping their surroundings so that good behavior flows downhill and bad behavior runs uphill, and in doing so discovers that the surest way to change what you do is often not to try harder, but to make the right thing easier. Eat the frog. There is an old saying, often attributed to Mark Twain, that if the first thing you do each morning is to eat a live frog, you can go through the rest of the day knowing that the worst is already behind you, that nothing else you face will be quite so bad. It is a vivid and slightly absurd image, and it carries within it one of the most useful cheat codes for a productive and less anxious life. The frog, of course, is a metaphor. It stands for the most important and most difficult task of your day, the one you are most tempted to avoid. And the cheat code is simply this: do that task first, before anything else. The wisdom here rests on several truths about how we work and how we feel. The first is about avoidance and its cost. There is usually one task each day that we most dread, the difficult, important, unpleasant thing we would rather not face. Left to our own devices, we tend to push it aside, doing easier and more pleasant things first, telling ourselves we will get to the hard thing later. But later rarely comes easily. Instead, the dreaded task hangs over the entire day, casting a shadow, draining our energy through anticipation, nagging at us even while we do other things. The avoidance does not spare us the discomfort, it stretches the discomfort across the whole day. By eating the frog first, by tackling the hardest, most important task at the very start, before the day's distractions and fatigue accumulate, you free yourself from this shadow. The dreaded thing is done, and with it gone, the rest of the day feels lighter, because nothing worse is waiting. You have spent your discomfort early, in a single concentrated dose, rather than spreading it thin across the hours. And there is a deep psychological relief in this, a sense of freedom and momentum that comes from having already faced the hardest thing while everything else, by comparison, feels manageable. There is also a hard truth about energy and willpower that makes the morning the right time for the frog. Our capacity for focus, discipline, and difficult effort tends to be greatest early, before the day has worn us down. As the hours pass, we accumulate fatigue and make countless small decisions, and our reserves of willpower and concentration deplete. The difficult task that might have been manageable in the fresh energy of the morning becomes nearly impossible to face in the depleted state of the evening. By doing the hardest thing first, you spend your best energy on the task that most demands it, rather than saving it for a time when your energy is gone. There is a further, quieter benefit, and it concerns the shape of the whole day. When you begin your day by accomplishing something significant and difficult, you set a tone of momentum and achievement that tends to carry forward. You have started with a real victory, and that victory generates a sense of capability and progress that makes the rest of the day's tasks feel more approachable. The opposite is also true. When you begin by frittering away the morning on trivial things while avoiding the important one, you set a tone of avoidance and drift that can pervade the whole day. How you begin colors what follows, and beginning with the frog begins with strength. It is worth being clear about what the frog actually is, because the technique depends on choosing rightly. The frog is not simply the most unpleasant task, it is the most important one, the task that would make the greatest difference, that you are also inclined to avoid. Often the most important tasks are difficult precisely because they matter, and that difficulty is exactly why we avoid them in favor of easy, trivial busy work that feels productive but accomplishes little. Eating the frog means identifying the one task that would most move your life or work forward, and refusing to let the easy distractions crowd it out. If there are two frogs, the saying goes, eat the bigger one first. Putting this into practice is simple in form, though it requires a little resolve. The night before, or first thing in the morning, identify your frog, the single most important and most avoided task of the day. Then, before you check messages, before you do the easy things, before the day's distractions take hold, do that task, or at least begin it in earnest. Protect the first part of your day for it. Let the small and easy things wait until the frog is eaten. Guard that early time as the time for what matters most. One caution makes this far easier to follow. Do not check messages or email before the frog is eaten. The moment you open your inbox, you hand the shape of your morning over to other people's demands, and the fresh energy meant for your most important task is spent instead on reacting to whatever has arrived. The frog is best eaten in the quiet before the world starts talking to you. Keep that early stretch as a small sanctuary for your own most important work, and let the messages wait. They will still be there, and you will meet them from a place of accomplishment rather than distraction. What makes eating the frog a true cheat code is that it works with the grain of our energy rather than against it, spending our freshest willpower on what matters most and freeing the rest of the day from the shadow of the dreaded thing. Most people do the reverse, filling their fresh morning hours with easy busy work while the important task looms untouched, poisoning the day with anticipation and finally being faced, if at all, in the exhausted evening. The one who learns to eat the frog first turns the whole pattern around, meeting the hardest thing head-on while strong, and walking through the rest of the day light, free, and already victorious. Parkinson's law. There is a curious and slightly maddening pattern that anyone who has ever worked to a deadline will recognize. Give yourself a week to complete a task, and it somehow takes the whole week. Give yourself a day to complete the very same task, and, remarkably, it gets done in a day. The work seems to swell or shrink to fill exactly the time you allot to it, as if time were a container and the task an expanding gas. This observation was captured by the writer Cyril Northcote Parkinson in a principle that now bears his name, and inside it lies a genuine cheat code. Parkinson's law states that work expands to fill the time available for its completion, and once you understand this, you can use it deliberately. At first the law sounds like a mere complaint about inefficiency, but it points to something real about how tasks and time interact. When we have a great deal of time for a task, we tend, often without noticing, to work more slowly, to fuss over small details, to allow distractions, to procrastinate in the comfortable knowledge that there is plenty of time left. The abundance of time invites a kind of looseness, and the task spreads out to occupy it. When time is short, by contrast, that looseness vanishes. We focus, we cut the unnecessary, we make decisions quickly, we stop polishing what is already good enough, and we get the essential work done. The pressure of a tight deadline concentrates the mind wonderfully. The cheat code, then, is to deliberately give yourself less time than you think you need, to set tight, even slightly uncomfortable deadlines, and to use the concentrating force of Parkinson's law on purpose. Instead of letting a task sprawl across all the time available, you compress the container, and the task compresses to fit. A report you would have taken a week over gets done in 2 focused days when you decide it must. A task you would have let fill the whole morning gets done in a sharp hour when you give it only an hour. By shrinking the time, you summon the focus that scarcity produces, and you accomplish the same work in a fraction of the hours. Why does this work rather than simply producing worse results? Because a great deal of the time we spend on tasks is not spent on the essential work at all. It is spent on procrastination, on over-perfecting details that do not matter, on distraction, on the looseness that abundant time permits. Tight deadlines cut away this waste. They force us to distinguish the essential from the inessential, to focus on what truly matters and let go of what does not, to stop gold-plating and call the work done. Often the result produced under a tight deadline is not meaningfully worse than the one that would have emerged from a loose one, because the extra time would have gone mostly to waste and worry, not to genuine improvement. There is a caution to observe, of course, for the law can be pushed too far. Deadlines that are impossibly tight produce not focus but panic and shoddy work, and some tasks genuinely require substantial time to do well. The art lies in setting deadlines that are tight enough to concentrate the mind and cut the waste, but not so tight as to make good work impossible. The goal is productive pressure, the kind that sharpens focus, not crushing pressure, the kind that induces despair. Used wisely, within reason, the tight deadline is a tool. Used recklessly, it becomes a source of stress and error. This principle connects to a broader truth about focus and constraint. We often imagine that more time, more resources, more room will lead to better results, but constraint frequently produces focus, creativity, and decisiveness that abundance does not. When we have unlimited time, we drift. When time is bounded, we engage. This is why some people work best under a little pressure, and why a looming deadline can produce in a few hours what months of leisurely intention could not. The container of time shapes the work poured into it, and a smaller container often yields a denser, more concentrated result. Putting Parkinson's law to work means becoming deliberate about the deadlines you set for yourself rather than letting tasks sprawl across whatever time happens to be available. Estimate how long a task would take if you were fully focused and cutting all the waste, and then set a deadline close to that, tight enough to feel a little pressure. Break large tasks into parts, each with its own short deadline, to keep the concentrating force alive throughout. Use timers and fixed blocks to create artificial scarcity of time. And resist the temptation to let a task expand simply because there is time for it to expand into. It even helps to announce a deadline to someone else, so that a little social weight holds you to the shorter time you have chosen. What makes Parkinson's law a true cheat code is that it lets you reclaim vast amounts of time simply by changing the deadlines you set, harnessing the natural way that focus rises to meet scarcity. Most people let their tasks quietly expand to consume all the time available, mistaking the hours spent for work accomplished, when much of that time dissolves into distraction and needless polishing. The one who understands Parkinson's law takes control of the container, deliberately shrinking the time to summon the focus, and discovers that a great deal of what we call the length of a task is not the task at all, but only the room we gave it to spread. Effect labeling. When a strong emotion rises inside us, fear, anger, anxiety, sadness, our instinct is often to push it away, to suppress it, to distract ourselves, or to be swept along by it entirely. We treat the feeling as something to escape or something that has seized control. But there is a quiet, almost paradoxical cheat code for taking the edge off an intense emotion, and it does not involve fighting the feeling or fleeing from it. It involves simply naming it. Putting a strong emotion into words, saying to yourself, "This is anxiety," or "I am feeling angry," or "There is fear here," measurably reduces its intensity. This is called effect labeling, and it is sometimes summed up in a memorable phrase: name it to tame it. At first this seems too simple to be real. How could merely naming a feeling change how strongly you feel it? Yet research in psychology and neuroscience has found this effect again and again. When people put their emotional experiences into words, the intensity of the emotion tends to diminish, and brain studies suggest a mechanism for why. Putting a feeling into language appears to engage the more reflective, reasoning parts of the brain, and in doing so it seems to quiet the more reactive, alarm-driven parts that generate the raw emotional charge. The act of labeling shifts the emotion, even a little, from something that simply happens to you into something you are observing and describing, and that shift loosens its grip. There is a crucial distinction here, one that makes effect labeling work where other approaches fail. Naming an emotion is not the same as suppressing it or judging it. You are not telling yourself that you should not feel this way, not pushing the feeling down, not criticizing yourself for having it. You are simply, neutrally, acknowledging what is present. This is what I am feeling right now. This is an act of recognition, not rejection. Suppression tends to make emotions stronger and more persistent, because the feeling, denied, fights to be acknowledged. Labeling does the opposite. It gives the feeling the acknowledgement it seems to seek, and in being seen and named, the emotion often softens on its own. The reason this matters so much is that unnamed emotions have a way of running us from the shadows. When a feeling is present but unacknowledged, it can drive our behavior and color our whole experience without our even realizing it. A vague cloud of anxiety making everything feel threatening, an unnamed anger leaking into our words and actions. By bringing the emotion into the light of language, naming it clearly, we create a small but vital gap between ourselves and the feeling. We move from being the emotion, lost inside it, to having the emotion, aware of it as one part of our experience. In that gap lies the beginning of freedom, the space in which we can choose our response rather than merely react. Putting effect labeling into practice is beautifully simple, which is part of its power. When you notice a strong emotion, pause and name it, silently or aloud, as plainly and specifically as you can. Not just "I feel bad," but more precisely, "This is anxiety about tomorrow," or "I am feeling hurt and a little angry." The more specific and accurate the label, the better it tends to work, because precision reflects real recognition. You can do this in your head in a difficult moment, or you can write your feelings down, which is itself a form of labeling and part of why journaling about emotions can be so calming. Simply describing, in words, what you are feeling begins to settle it. It helps to bring a certain gentle curiosity to this rather than a clinical detachment. You are turning toward the feeling with interest and acceptance, asking, in effect, what is here right now, and letting yourself notice and name it without needing to fix it or flee it in that moment. This attitude of accepting acknowledgement is itself soothing. Emotions, much like people, tend to calm down when they feel truly heard, and to escalate when they feel dismissed or fought. To name your feeling with acceptance is to hear yourself, and that inner hearing has a quieting power that struggle never does. Affect labeling is especially valuable precisely in the moments when emotions threaten to overwhelm us, when fear or anger or anxiety surges and we feel about to be swept away. In those moments, the simple act of stopping to name what is happening, this is panic, this is fury, this is grief, can create just enough of a gap to keep us from being entirely carried off. It will not make the feeling vanish, and it is not meant to. It simply takes the sharpest edge off the intensity and restores a sliver of the reflective awareness that strong emotion tends to drown, and that sliver can be the difference between reacting blindly and responding with some measure of choice. What makes affect labeling a true cheat code is that it turns one of our most human capacities, the ability to put experience into words, into a tool for regulating the very emotions that words so often seem powerless against. Most people, in the grip of a strong feeling, either suppress it or are ruled by it, and both roads lead deeper into its power. The one who learns to name their emotions takes a third path, neither fleeing nor drowning but simply, honestly acknowledging what is present, and discovers the quiet paradox at the heart of the mind, that a feeling faced and named with acceptance loosens its hold, while a feeling denied or fought only tightens its grip. Cognitive reappraisal. Two people can live through the very same event and be affected in completely opposite ways. One is devastated by a setback, the other treats it as a valuable lesson and moves on stronger. One is paralyzed by nervousness before a performance, the other feels the same racing heart and calls it excitement. The difference between them is not the event itself, which is identical, but the meaning each assigns to it, the story each tells about what it means. This points to one of the most powerful truths in all of psychology and to a genuine cheat code for the emotional life. Our emotions are shaped not directly by what happens to us, but by how we interpret what happens. And interpretations can be changed. This deliberate changing of the meaning we assign to a situation is called cognitive reappraisal. The foundational insight, which runs through much of modern psychology, is that between an event and our emotional response to it lies a hidden step, our interpretation of the event. We rarely notice this step, because it happens instantly and automatically, and so we experience our emotions as if they came directly from the events themselves. But they do not. It is our thoughts about a situation, the meaning we give it, the story we tell about what it implies, that generate our feelings. A traffic jam does not directly cause fury. The thought that it is ruining everything and that we cannot bear it does. A criticism does not directly cause devastation. The interpretation that it proves we are worthless does. Change the interpretation, and the emotion changes with it. Cognitive reappraisal is the practice of deliberately examining and revising these interpretations. When you feel a difficult emotion, you look at the thought or the story underneath it, and you ask whether it is accurate, whether it is the only way to see the situation, and whether there is a truer or more helpful way to understand what is happening. You are not lying to yourself or pretending that bad things are good. You are looking for a more accurate and more constructive interpretation among the several that any situation allows. Often our automatic interpretations are distorted, catastrophic, or one-sided, and simply seeing the situation more clearly and completely naturally shifts the feeling. Consider how this works in practice. You make a mistake at work, and the automatic interpretation floods in. I'm incompetent, everyone will think less of me, this is a disaster. That interpretation generates shame and anxiety. Reappraisal invites you to examine it. Is it true that one mistake makes you incompetent, when you have done good work many times before? Is a single error really a disaster, or is it a normal part of doing difficult things, even an opportunity to learn and improve? By replacing the distorted, catastrophic interpretation with a more accurate and balanced one, the intensity of the shame and anxiety subsides, not because you have denied the mistake, but because you have seen it in true proportion. One of the most striking applications of reappraisal concerns the way we interpret our own bodily states. The physical sensations of anxiety, the racing heart, the quickened breath, the heightened alertness, are almost identical to the sensations of excitement. What differs is the label we attach. Research has shown that people who reinterpret their pre-performance nerves as excitement, telling themselves "I am excited" rather than "I am anxious," actually perform better and feel better than those who try to calm down. The bodily arousal is the same. The meaning assigned to it transforms the experience. This is reappraisal in its purest form, changing not the sensation but the story about the sensation. Reappraisal is powerful in part because it addresses emotion at its source rather than merely managing its symptoms. Some strategies for handling emotion work downstream, trying to suppress or distract from a feeling that has already formed. Reappraisal works upstream, at the interpretation that generates the feeling in the first place, so that a different emotion arises rather than a fully formed one having to be wrestled down. Studies consistently find that reappraisal is one of the more effective and healthy strategies for regulating emotion, associated with better well-being over time, precisely because it changes the feeling at its root rather than fighting it after the fact. Putting reappraisal into practice takes a little training but grows easier with use. When a strong negative emotion arises, pause and identify the thought or interpretation beneath it, the story you are telling about the situation. Then examine that story. Is it accurate? Is it the whole picture? Is it the only way to see this? What is a truer, more balanced, more helpful way to understand what is happening? Deliberately adopt the more accurate interpretation and notice how the feeling shifts. Common reframes include seeing a threat as a challenge, a setback as a lesson, a difficulty as temporary rather than permanent, and a problem as specific rather than a sign of some global failure. What makes cognitive reappraisal a true cheat code is that it hands you a measure of authorship over your own emotional life, revealing that you are not simply at the mercy of events but are always, whether you notice it or not, interpreting them, and that the interpretation is where your power lies. Most people live as though their feelings were dictated directly by circumstances, and so they feel helpless, at the mercy of whatever happens. The one who learns to reappraise discovers the hidden step between event and emotion, and learns to work there, changing the meaning and so changing the feeling, and in doing so gains not the power to control what happens, but the far greater power to shape what it does to them. The physiological sigh. Of all the cheat codes for the human mind, few are as immediate, as physical, or as reliably effective as this one, and it can be performed anywhere, at any time, in a matter of seconds, without anyone even noticing. When you are stressed, anxious, or overwhelmed, there is a specific pattern of breathing that can calm your body faster than almost anything else, and it works not through belief or effort but through the direct physical machinery of your nervous system. It is called the physiological sigh, and it may be the fastest deliberate way a human being can shift themselves from a state of stress toward a state of calm. To understand why it works, it helps to know that your breathing and your nervous system are deeply, two-directionally linked. Your emotional state affects your breathing, which is why stress makes your breath shallow and rapid. But the link runs the other way too. Your breathing affects your emotional state, so that by changing how you breathe, you can directly change how your body and mind feel. This is enormously useful, because while you cannot simply decide to feel calm, you can decide how to breathe, and the right kind of breathing sends a powerful signal of calm through the body. Breath is the one part of the autonomic nervous system that is easily placed under conscious control, a lever we can reach directly. The physiological sigh is a particular breathing pattern, and it happens to be one the body already performs on its own. It consists of a double inhale followed by a long, slow exhale. You breathe in through the nose, and then, at the top of that breath, you take a second, shorter sniff of air on top, filling the lungs a little more fully. Then you release all of it in a long, slow, extended exhale, letting the breath out slowly and completely. That is the whole technique: a deep inhale, a second small sniff on top, and then a long, slow exhale. Repeating this just a few times, even once or twice, can produce a noticeable shift toward calm within seconds. Why is this particular pattern so effective? Part of the answer lies in the long exhale. When you exhale slowly and for longer than you inhale, you engage the branch of the nervous system responsible for calming and settling the body, the branch that slows the heart and eases the stress response. Extended exhales are a direct signal to the body to relax. The double inhale plays its own role. It helps to fully inflate the tiny air sacs in the lungs, some of which tend to collapse under stress, allowing for more efficient release of carbon dioxide and helping to reset the breathing pattern. Together, the double inhale and the long exhale work with the body's own physiology to quickly shift it out of the stress state. Remarkably, this is not an invented technique, but one your body already uses naturally. When you have been crying, you often find yourself taking those characteristic shuddering double breaths as you begin to calm down. During sleep, the body periodically performs physiological sighs on its own to reinflate the lungs and regulate breathing. The technique simply takes this natural, built-in calming mechanism and lets you perform it deliberately, on demand, whenever you need it, rather than waiting for the body to do it on its own. You are borrowing a tool the body already trusts and using it consciously. The great advantages of the physiological sigh are its speed, its portability, and its invisibility. It works within seconds, far faster than most calming techniques, making it ideal for acute moments of stress, the spike of anxiety before speaking, the surge of anger in a tense exchange, the wave of panic that rises without warning. It requires no equipment, no special place, no time set aside. You can do it in the middle of a meeting, a difficult conversation, or a sleepless night. And it is nearly undetectable. No one around you need know that you are deliberately resetting your nervous system. In a heated moment, 1 or 2 physiological sighs can take enough edge off your stress to let you respond with more clarity and calm. Putting it into practice requires only that you remember it exists and use it when you need it. In any moment of stress, anxiety, or overwhelm, pause and take a physiological sigh, a full inhale through the nose, a second small sniff of air on top, and then a long, slow, complete exhale. Repeat it a few times if needed. You can also use it proactively, before a stressful event, to settle yourself in advance, or as a brief regular practice to lower your baseline level of tension. The more familiar it becomes, the more readily it will come to you in the moments when you most need it. What makes the physiological sigh a true cheat code is that it offers direct, physical access to your own nervous system, a way to reach past thought and feeling to the underlying machinery of calm, and to shift it deliberately in seconds. Most people, when stressed, have no immediate tool but to endure the feeling or to try, usually in vain, to think their way out of it. The one who knows the physiological sigh carries a small, silent switch they can flip anywhere, working with the body's own design rather than against it, and discovers that sometimes the fastest way to change the mind is not through the mind at all, but through the simple ancient act of the breath. Self-distancing. When we are caught in the grip of a difficult emotion or wrestling with a hard problem in our own lives, we tend to be terrible advisors to ourselves. We ruminate, we spiral, we lose perspective, we drown in the intensity of our own experience. Yet the strange thing is that when a friend comes to us with the very same problem, we are often calm, wise, and clear, able to see the situation plainly and offer good counsel. Why the difference? Largely because we are too close to our own troubles, immersed in them from the inside, while we view our friends' troubles from a healthy distance. There is a cheat code that lets us borrow that outside perspective for our own struggles, and it is called self-distancing. Self-distancing is the practice of stepping back from your own experience and viewing it from the perspective of an outside observer, rather than from deep inside the emotion. One of the simplest and most studied ways to do this is through a small shift in language. Instead of thinking about your situation in the first person, using I and me, you address yourself by your own name or as you, in the second or third person. Rather than thinking, "Why am I so anxious about this?" you think, using your name, "Why is this making you so anxious? What would help you here?" This small linguistic shift creates a surprising amount of psychological distance, and with it, a calmer and clearer perspective. It sounds almost too simple to matter, yet the research is consistent and striking. When people reflect on their problems using their own name or the word "you" rather than "I", they tend to feel less anxious, think more clearly, regulate their emotions better, and reason more wisely about their situations. The shift in pronouns seems to shift the whole vantage point, moving you from the immersed, first-person perspective, in which you are drowning in the feeling, to a distanced, observer perspective, from which you can see the situation more objectively, as you would a friend's. And from that distanced vantage, wisdom that was inaccessible from inside the storm becomes available. Why does this work? Because immersion and distance produce very different modes of thinking. When you are immersed in your experience, seeing it from within, you are flooded by the raw feeling, caught in the details, unable to see the larger picture. When you take a distanced perspective, you gain a wider view, the emotion loses some of its overwhelming immediacy, and you can think about the situation more calmly and rationally. This is the same reason we give better advice to others than to ourselves. We naturally view their situations from a distance. Self-distancing simply lets us apply that same distanced, wiser perspective to our own lives. There is a poignant lesson hidden in this, and it is worth pausing on. The wisdom and kindness we so easily extend to others are not beyond us when it comes to ourselves. They are simply blocked by our closeness, by the way immersion floods out perspective. We are not actually wiser about our friends' lives than our own. We are only farther from their pain, and that distance is what lets the wisdom through. Self-distancing works because it manufactures, deliberately, the very distance that makes us good advisors to everyone but ourselves. There are several ways to create this distance, and the pronoun shift is only one. You can imagine advising a friend who faces exactly your situation, and notice what you would tell them, which is often far kinder and wiser than what you tell yourself. You can imagine looking back on the present difficulty from a point far in the future, asking how much it will matter in a year or in 10. You can picture yourself as a neutral observer watching the scene from the outside, or imagine a wise, caring mentor looking at your situation and offering their view. Each of these techniques loosens the grip of immersion and grants the clarity that comes with distance. Self-distancing is particularly valuable for breaking the cycle of rumination, the repetitive, spiraling churning of the same painful thoughts that keeps us stuck and only deepens distress. Rumination is a deeply immersed state, in which we are lost inside our thoughts and feelings, going around and around. Self-distancing interrupts this by pulling us out of the immersed perspective and into the observer's chair, from which the same thoughts can be examined rather than simply suffered. From that distance, we can often see what we were too close to see, that the situation is not as catastrophic as it felt, that there are options we had not considered, that this feeling, however intense, will pass. Putting self-distancing into practice is a matter of remembering to shift your perspective when you are caught in difficulty. When you notice yourself anxious, upset, or ruminating, try addressing yourself by your name or as you, and reflect on your situation in that voice. Ask what you would tell a dear friend in exactly this position. Imagine viewing the scene from the outside, or from the vantage of your future self looking back. Any of these moves creates the small but crucial distance that lets clarity and calm return. With practice, stepping back becomes a reflex you can call on whenever the intensity of your own experience begins to overwhelm you. What makes self-distancing a true cheat code is that it gives you access, for your own struggles, to the very wisdom and calm you so readily offer to others, simply by changing the vantage point from which you view your life. Most people remain trapped inside their own experience, too close to see clearly, drowning in feelings they would help a friend navigate with ease. The one who learns to step back becomes, in a sense, their own wise friend, viewing their troubles from a healthy distance and discovering that the clarity they always had for others was available for themselves as well, waiting just a single step outside the storm. The 10 rule. In the heat of a difficult moment, our sense of proportion collapses. A present problem, a wave of anger, a tempting choice, a painful worry, fills the entire screen of our attention, and it feels, in that moment, enormous, urgent, all-important. We make decisions and react to feelings as though this instant were the only thing that mattered, as though its intensity were a true measure of its importance. But intensity is a liar. Most of what feels overwhelming right now will look very different with the passage of time. There is a simple cheat code for restoring perspective and making wiser choices in such moments, a small tool for stepping out of the tyranny of the present. It is called the 10th of October, 10 rule. The rule, popularized by the writer Susie Welsh, is elegantly simple. When you face a decision or are caught in a strong emotion, you pause and ask yourself 3 questions. How will I feel about this in 10 minutes? How will I feel about this in 10 months? And how will I feel about this in 10 years? By deliberately projecting yourself forward across these 3 very different horizons of time, you pull your perspective out of the narrow, magnified present and place the situation into the larger context of your life, where its true proportions become visible. What loomed so large in the moment often shrinks to its real size when viewed across these spans of time. The power of this rule comes from the way it counteracts a deep bias in the human mind, our tendency to overweight the present and to be ruled by whatever we feel most intensely right now. In the grip of the moment, the immediate feeling dominates, and we lose sight of the longer view. A furious impulse feels justified and important, a tempting indulgence feels worth it, a present worry feels like the end of the world. The 10th of October, 10 rule forces the longer view back into consideration, reminding us that we are not only creatures of this instant but beings whose lives extend across months and years, and that our choices should serve that larger life, not just the loudest feeling of the moment. Consider how the 3 horizons work together, each doing its own job. The 10-minute question captures the immediate, often intense feeling, and acknowledges it honestly. Yes, right now this is painful, or tempting, or infuriating. The 10-month question asks about the medium term, where many present intensities have already faded and the real consequences of a choice begin to show. And the 10-year question invokes the long view, the perspective of your whole life, from which most present troubles appear small and many present temptations appear clearly not worth it. Holding all 3 horizons at once gives a balanced picture, honoring the present feeling without being enslaved to it. The rule is especially useful in 2 kinds of situations. The first is emotional reactivity, the moments when a strong feeling threatens to drive us into words or actions we will regret. The furious message we are about to send, the harsh words rising to our lips, the impulsive reaction to a slight, all of these look different when we ask how they will seem in 10 months or 10 years. Almost always, the honest answer is that the momentary satisfaction of venting will be long forgotten, while the damage may linger, and this recognition can stay our hand. The second is temptation and short-term thinking, the choices where an immediate pleasure conflicts with a longer good. The tempting indulgence that feels so worth it now often looks very different when weighed against how we will feel about it across months and years. There is a deeper wisdom folded into this rule, beyond its use in specific moments. It trains a habit of mind, the habit of considering the longer consequences of our choices rather than being ruled by immediate feeling, and this habit is close to the heart of wisdom itself. Much of foolishness consists in sacrificing our long-term well-being for short-term feeling, and much of wisdom consists in weighing the present against the future and choosing accordingly. By regularly asking how things will look across these horizons of time, we strengthen the part of ourselves that thinks beyond the moment, and we gradually become people who act in the service of our whole lives rather than merely our current impulses. Putting the 10th of October, 10 rule into practice requires only that you remember to pause and ask the 3 questions when you face a charged decision or a strong emotion. Before you react, before you choose, take a breath and project yourself forward. 10 minutes, 10 months, 10 years. Notice how the situation looks from each vantage, and let the longer views inform your choice. The specific spans are not sacred. The point is simply to consider the short, medium, and long term together, rather than being trapped in the magnified present. With practice, this projection into the future becomes a natural check, quietly restoring proportion whenever the present threatens to overwhelm. What makes the 10th of October, 10 rule a true cheat code is that it hands you an escape from the tyranny of the present moment, letting you see your choices in the true light of time and act from wisdom rather than from the loudest feeling of the instant. Most people are ruled by the present, mistaking the intensity of a feeling for its importance and making choices they later regret. The one who learns to consult the 10-minute, 10-month, and 10-year horizons steps outside that narrow window and discovers that the present, for all its overwhelming force, is only one small part of a much larger life, and rarely deserves the total power it tries to claim. The gratitude reset. The human mind, for reasons rooted deep in our evolution, is naturally inclined toward the negative. We notice threats more than safety, dwell on problems more than blessings, remember criticism more than praise, and take for granted the countless good things in our lives while fixating on the few that are wrong. This negativity bias once helped our ancestors survive in a dangerous world, but in modern life it often leaves us dwelling in dissatisfaction, blind to the good that surrounds us, our attention snagged on what is lacking. There is a simple, deliberate cheat code for counteracting this bias and resetting our emotional state, and it is one of the most researched and reliable practices in all of psychology. It is the practice of gratitude. Gratitude, as a cheat code, is the deliberate act of turning your attention toward the good things in your life, the things you have, the things that have gone well, the people and circumstances you might otherwise take for granted, and genuinely appreciating them. It is not a vague instruction to be more positive, nor a denial of real difficulties. It is a specific practice of directing attention, of choosing, deliberately and regularly, to notice and appreciate what is good, thereby counterbalancing the mind's automatic drift toward what is wrong. And this simple redirection of attention has effects on well-being that are surprisingly large and well documented. The research on gratitude is remarkably consistent. People who regularly practice gratitude, through simple means such as keeping a gratitude journal or reflecting each day on what they are thankful for, tend to be happier, more satisfied with their lives, less prone to depression and anxiety, and even physically healthier, sleeping better and feeling more energetic. These are not trivial effects, and they flow from a practice that costs nothing and takes only minutes. The regular, deliberate turning of attention toward the good appears to genuinely shift the baseline of a person's emotional life over time, lifting the general tone of their days. Why does gratitude have such power? Because attention shapes experience. What we habitually attend to becomes, in effect, our world. If our attention is habitually snagged on problems, lacks, and threats, we live in a world that feels full of problems, lacks, and threats, regardless of how much good is actually present. If we deliberately train our attention toward the good, we begin to live in a world that feels richer, safer, more abundant. Gratitude does not change the facts of our circumstances, but it changes which facts we notice and dwell upon. And since our felt experience is built largely from what we attend to, changing our attention changes our experience of life itself. Gratitude also works as an immediate reset in difficult moments, not only as a long-term practice. When you are caught in a bad mood, a spiral of complaint, or a wave of dissatisfaction, deliberately pausing to bring to mind a few things you are grateful for can shift your emotional state on the spot. It is difficult to remain fully in resentment or self-pity while genuinely appreciating something good, because gratitude and grievance draw on opposite orientations of attention. By calling gratitude to mind in a low moment, you interrupt the negative spiral and gently turn the mind toward a different and more nourishing focus. This is why gratitude can function as a quick emotional reset, a way to change the channel of the mind when it has locked onto the negative. For gratitude to work, though, it must be genuine rather than mechanical, and this is an important subtlety. Simply listing good things by rote, without actually feeling any appreciation, does little. The power comes from truly pausing to feel the appreciation, to let the reality of the good thing land, to savor it for a moment. Quality matters more than quantity. It is better to deeply appreciate one thing than to list many without feeling. It also helps to be specific and to vary what you attend to, noticing particular good things rather than repeating the same general items, and to include the small and ordinary blessings, a warm drink, a kind word, a moment of beauty, which the mind so easily overlooks. Putting gratitude into practice can take many forms, and the best is the one you will actually sustain. Some people keep a gratitude journal, writing down a few things they are thankful for each day, ideally with a moment of genuine feeling for each. Some reflect on their blessings at a set time, upon waking or before sleep. Some pause in difficult moments to deliberately call to mind what is good. Some express their gratitude directly to the people they appreciate, which deepens both the feeling and the relationship. Whatever the form, the essence is the same: regularly, deliberately turning attention toward the good, and genuinely appreciating it. What makes gratitude a true cheat code is that it lets you counteract a deep and ancient bias of the mind simply by choosing where to place your attention, and in doing so, lifts the whole tone of your experience without changing a single external circumstance. Most people drift along with the negativity bias, dwelling on what is wrong and taking the good for granted, and so they live poorer inner lives than their actual circumstances warrant. The one who practices gratitude takes hold of their own attention and turns it, deliberately and regularly, toward the good, and discovers that happiness depends far less on getting more of what we lack than on truly noticing and appreciating the abundance we already so easily overlook. Opposite action. When we are in the grip of a powerful emotion, that emotion comes with a built-in urge, a pull toward a particular kind of behavior. Fear urges us to avoid and escape. Anger urges us to attack. Sadness urges us to withdraw and shut down. Shame urges us to hide. These urges are automatic, and usually we simply obey them, acting as the emotion directs. Much of the time this is fine, and the emotion's guidance is sound. But sometimes the emotion is unjustified, out of proportion, or unhelpful, and obeying its urge only makes things worse, deepening the very feeling it springs from. For these moments there is a powerful cheat code drawn from psychological therapy, and it is called opposite action. When an emotion is unhelpful, you deliberately act in the opposite way to what the emotion urges. The idea comes from the observation that emotions and behaviors are locked in a two-way loop. An emotion drives a behavior, but the behavior, in turn, feeds back and reinforces the emotion. Fear makes you avoid, and avoiding makes the fear grow stronger, because you never learn that the feared thing is survivable. Sadness makes you withdraw, and withdrawing deepens the sadness, cutting you off from the very things that might lift it. The emotion and its associated behavior reinforce each other in a self-perpetuating cycle. Opposite action breaks this cycle by refusing to perform the reinforcing behavior, and instead deliberately doing its opposite, which feeds back to weaken rather than strengthen the emotion. Consider how this works with fear and avoidance. The clearest example. When we fear something that is not truly dangerous, the urge is to avoid it, and avoidance provides immediate relief, which is why we do it. But that relief comes at a terrible long-term cost. Each avoidance confirms and strengthens the fear, teaching the mind that the thing was indeed too dangerous to face, so that the fear grows and the life it constrains shrinks. Opposite action says, when the fear is unwarranted, approach rather than avoid. Do the feared thing, gently and repeatedly, and the fear, deprived of the avoidance that fed it, gradually weakens, as the mind learns through direct experience that the thing can be faced and survived. This is the principle behind overcoming so many fears. The same logic applies across the emotions. When sadness or low mood urges you to withdraw, isolate, and do nothing, opposite action urges you to gently engage instead, to reach out to others, to do something active and meaningful even when you do not feel like it, because engagement feeds back to lift the mood while withdrawal deepens it. When anger urges you to attack or lash out in a situation where that would be destructive, opposite action urges you to step back, soften, perhaps even to act with kindness, which diffuses the anger rather than feeding it. When shame urges you to hide what is in fact nothing to be ashamed of, opposite action urges you to reveal it, to stand openly, which dissolves the shame that hiding would only entrench. There is a crucial condition on this cheat code, however, and it must be understood clearly. Opposite action is for emotions that are unjustified or unhelpful, not for emotions that fit the facts and are guiding you rightly. If you feel fear in the face of genuine danger, the fear is doing its job, and you should heed it, not act opposite to it. If you feel anger at a real injustice that calls for action, the anger may be pointing you toward something right. Opposite action is the tool for the times when the emotion does not fit the situation, when the fear is of something harmless, the shame attached to something blameless, the withdrawal deepening a sadness with no purpose. The first step is always to ask honestly whether the emotion fits the facts. When the emotion is indeed unwarranted, opposite action must be done fully and wholeheartedly to work. It is not enough to grudgingly go through the motions while inwardly still obeying the emotion. To truly weaken the feeling, you throw yourself into the opposite behavior completely, with your whole posture, voice, and attention. If you are acting opposite to fear by approaching what you dread, you approach it fully, not timidly with one foot ready to flee. If you are acting opposite to sadness by engaging, you engage genuinely, giving yourself to the activity. The completeness of the opposite action is what allows it to feed back powerfully enough to shift the emotion. Putting opposite action into practice begins with awareness, noticing the emotion you are feeling and the urge it carries. Then you ask whether the emotion fits the facts and whether obeying its urge would help or harm. If the emotion is unjustified or unhelpful, you identify the opposite of what it urges, and you do that fully and wholeheartedly. Fear says avoid, you approach. Sadness says withdraw, you engage. Anger says attack, you soften. Shame says hide, you reveal. And you do it not once but repeatedly, for the cycle weakens with repetition, until the unhelpful emotion has loosened its grip. What makes opposite action a true cheat code is that it lets you break free of the self-reinforcing loops in which unhelpful emotions trap us, using deliberate behavior to reshape feeling rather than being endlessly ruled by it. Most people simply obey their emotions, and when those emotions are unwarranted, they are dragged deeper into fear, sadness, or shame by the very behaviors those feelings demand. The one who learns opposite action gains a way out, recognizing when an emotion has ceased to serve them and deliberately acting against its pull, and discovering that we are not merely the servants of our feelings, but can, through action, gently and steadily teach our emotions to let us go. The Ben Franklin Effect. We tend to assume that we do favors for people because we like them, that kindness flows outward from affection. The liking comes first, and the good deed follows. But one of the most delightful and counterintuitive findings in all of psychology suggests that the arrow can point the other way as well. Doing a favor for someone can actually cause you to like them more. And this means that if you want someone to like you, one of the most effective things you can do is not to do a favor for them, but to ask them to do a small favor for you. This strange reversal is named after the man who famously described it, and it is called the Ben Franklin Effect. The story goes that Benjamin Franklin, wishing to win over a rival who disliked him, did not try to flatter the man or do him kindnesses. Instead, he asked to borrow a rare and valuable book from the man's library. The rival, perhaps flattered to be asked, lent the book. Franklin returned it promptly with a warm note of thanks. And from then on, the man who had been his adversary treated him with kindness and became a lasting friend. Franklin drew from this a memorable principle, that a person who has once done you a kindness will be more ready to do you another than one whom you yourself have obliged. The favor you receive, rather than the favor you give, is what builds the bond. Why should this be so? The leading explanation involves the mind's deep need for its beliefs and actions to line up, to feel consistent. When you do a favor for someone, your mind faces a small puzzle. Why did I just help this person? If you do not particularly like them, your action and your feeling are out of step, and this inconsistency is uncomfortable. To resolve it, the mind quietly adjusts the feeling to match the action, concluding that you must in fact like the person, for why else would you have helped them? The behavior comes first, and the feeling reshapes itself to justify it. Having helped someone, you come to like them more, because liking them makes sense of what you did. This reveals something profound and a little unsettling about human beings. We often infer our feelings from our actions, rather than the other way around. We like to think we act because of how we feel, but frequently we feel in accordance with how we have acted, our minds working backward to make our attitudes fit our behavior. This is why the Ben Franklin effect works. By getting someone to act kindly toward you, to do you a small favor, you set in motion this process by which their feelings adjust to fit their action, and they come to like you more as a result. Their own helpful behavior becomes evidence, to their own mind, that they must regard you warmly. The practical application is both simple and charming. If you want to build warmth with someone, especially someone who does not yet know you well or who seems cool toward you, ask them for a small, reasonable favor. Ask to borrow something. Ask for their advice or opinion. Ask for a small bit of help that they can easily give. The favor should be small enough that they will readily agree and will not feel imposed upon, and genuine enough not to seem like a manipulation. When they grant it, thank them warmly and sincerely. Something quietly shifts. Having helped you, they feel a little more warmly toward you, and a bond begins where none existed. There is a further, subtler benefit to asking for favors, one that runs against our instincts. We often avoid asking others for help because we fear it will burden them or make us seem weak or needy, and so we try to be entirely self-sufficient. But asking for a reasonable favor can actually flatter the other person and draw them closer. It signals that you trust and respect them, that you value their help or their expertise, and it gives them the small pleasure of being useful. People generally like to feel needed and capable, and a well-judged request for help offers them that feeling, while also, through the Ben Franklin effect, warming them toward you. Excessive self-reliance, by contrast, can keep people at a distance. Putting this into practice requires a shift in how you think about favors and connection. Instead of trying to win people over only by giving to them, recognize that inviting them to give to you, in small and reasonable ways, can be just as powerful, sometimes more so. When you want to build a relationship, do not only offer help, ask for a little. Let people do small kindnesses for you, and receive them with genuine gratitude. Be willing to ask for advice, for opinions, for minor assistance, understanding that these requests, far from pushing people away, tend to draw them in and to deepen their good feeling toward you. What makes the Ben Franklin effect a true cheat code is that it reverses our intuitions about how liking is built, revealing that we can win affection not only by what we give but by what we allow others to give us. Most people try to be liked purely through generosity and self-sufficiency, never suspecting that a well-placed request for a small favor might do more to warm a relationship than any gift. The one who understands the Ben Franklin effect knows that the human heart often follows the hand, that we come to like those we have helped, and that sometimes the most endearing thing you can do is simply, humbly, to ask someone for a little help and to thank them warmly when they give it. The Reciprocity Principle, woven deeply into human nature, across every culture on Earth, is a powerful and largely unconscious rule. When someone does something for us, we feel obligated to do something for them in return. Someone gives us a gift, and we feel we owe them a gift. Someone does us a favor, and we feel indebted until we can repay it. Someone offers a concession, and we feel pressed to concede something in turn. This deep sense of obligation to return what we have received is called the Reciprocity Principle, and it is one of the most powerful forces shaping human behavior, so automatic that we often act on it without noticing, and so strong that it can move us even when we would rather it did not. Reciprocity almost certainly runs so deep in us because it made human cooperation possible. In our long history as a social species, the willingness to return favors allowed people to help one another across time, to give now in the confidence of receiving later, to build the webs of mutual obligation that hold communities together. A person who took but never gave back would be shunned. A person who reliably reciprocated was a valued partner. Over countless generations, the sense of obligation to repay became wired deeply into us, an almost reflexive response to receiving, so that a gift or a favor creates in us a genuine, felt pressure to return it, a small debt we are uncomfortable leaving unpaid. Understanding this principle illuminates a great deal of human interaction, and it explains why the simple act of giving first is so powerful. When you do something for someone, offer help, a gift, a kindness, a concession, without being asked and without demanding anything in return, you activate their sense of reciprocity, and they come to feel a genuine desire to give something back to you. This is why generosity tends to be returned, why those who give freely often find others eager to help them, why a spirit of giving, rather than a posture of taking, so often opens doors. Giving first plants a seed of obligation and goodwill that naturally grows into a return. But the reciprocity principle has a shadow side, and honesty requires acknowledging it, because the same force that builds cooperation can be used to manipulate. Because reciprocity is so automatic and so strong, it can be exploited. Someone can give you a small, unsolicited gift or favor specifically in order to trigger your sense of obligation and extract a much larger return. This is a common technique in sales and persuasion. The free sample, the unexpected gift, the small favor offered precisely to create a debt that can then be called in. Recognizing this is important, both so that you are not manipulated by it and so that, when you use reciprocity yourself, you do so with genuine generosity rather than calculated manipulation, which people can often sense and resent. There is a particularly interesting form of reciprocity that operates not only with gifts and favors but with concessions, and it is worth understanding. When someone makes a concession to us, retreats from a larger request to a smaller one, we feel obligated to make a concession in return, often by agreeing to the smaller request. This is the basis of a classic persuasion technique, in which one begins with a large request likely to be refused, then retreats to the smaller request one actually wanted, and the other person, feeling the pressure of the apparent concession, is far more likely to agree than if the smaller request had been made alone. Their yes is, in a sense, a concession offered in return for yours. The Reciprocity Principle also teaches a deep lesson about how to build good relationships and a good life among others, quite apart from any technique. Because giving tends to be returned, and because generosity activates goodwill, a genuine posture of giving, of contributing to others, of offering help and kindness freely, tends over time to create a rich web of mutual support around you. Those who give generously and sincerely often find themselves surrounded by others willing to give to them in turn, not because they demanded it, but because the reciprocity principle quietly moves people to return the good they have received. To give is, in the long run, often to receive. Putting reciprocity to good use begins with leading through genuine generosity. Give first, help first, contribute first, without keeping a ledger or demanding return, trusting that the principle of reciprocity will, over time, bring much of it back. Offer your kindness, your help, your resources, your goodwill freely. At the same time, remain aware of reciprocity when it is used upon you, so that a small unsolicited gift or favor does not pressure you into a return out of proportion to it, or into agreeing to something against your interest. Use the principle honestly, and guard against its dishonest use by others. What makes reciprocity a true cheat code is that it reveals one of the deepest levers of human behavior, the near-universal impulse to return what we receive, and shows that the surest way to receive is often, paradoxically, to give first. Most people move through the social world in a spirit of taking or of careful exchange, waiting to receive before they give. The one who understands reciprocity leads with generosity, giving freely and sincerely, and finds that this posture, working with one of the most powerful forces in human nature, tends to return to the manifold, while also guarding them against those who would use the same force to manipulate. Active listening. Almost everyone believes they are a good listener, and almost no one truly is. What passes for listening in most conversations is really a kind of waiting, a pause during which we prepare our own next remark, half attending to the other person while our real focus is on what we will say when it is our turn. We hear the words, but we do not truly receive the person. And because genuine listening is so rare, the person who actually learns to do it holds a quietly enormous power, the power to make others feel truly heard, understood, and valued, which is one of the deepest things a human being can offer another. This skill is called active listening, and it is a cheat code for connection unlike any other. Active listening means giving your full, genuine attention to another person, truly seeking to understand what they are saying and feeling, rather than merely waiting for your turn to speak. It means setting aside, for the moment, your own thoughts, your own agenda, your own eagerness to respond, and devoting yourself entirely to receiving the other person. It is listening not to reply but to understand, following not just the words but the meaning and feeling beneath them. This sounds simple, and in a sense it is, but it runs against the strong pull of our own self-focus, and doing it genuinely requires real intention and presence. The reason active listening is so powerful is that it answers one of the deepest human hungers, the hunger to be understood, to be truly seen and heard by another. Most people go through their lives feeling only partially heard, their words landing on distracted or half-attending ears, their inner worlds rarely truly received. When someone finally listens to them fully, with genuine attention and the sincere desire to understand, it is a profound and often moving experience. They feel valued, respected, cared for, real. And they come to feel a deep warmth toward the person who gave them this rare gift. To listen well is to make another person feel that they matter, and there are few things more binding than that. Active listening involves several elements working together. It begins with full presence, giving the person your undivided attention, setting aside distractions, and being genuinely with them. It involves listening to understand rather than to respond, resisting the urge to prepare your reply and instead truly taking in what they are saying. It includes attending to the feeling beneath the words, the emotion behind the content, and often reflecting it back, so that the person feels their deeper meaning has been grasped. It involves asking questions that draw the person out and show genuine interest, and reflecting back what you have understood, so they know they have truly been heard. And crucially, it means resisting the urge to jump in with your own stories, solutions, or judgments before the person has fully been received. That last point deserves emphasis, because it is where most listening fails. When someone shares something with us, our instinct is to respond quickly, to relate it to our own experience, to offer advice, to fix the problem, to turn the conversation back toward ourselves. But this instinct, however well-meaning, often leaves the other person feeling unheard, because we have rushed past their experience to our own response. Active listening asks us to stay with the other person longer, to let them fully express and feel heard before we bring in anything of our own. Often people do not want our advice or our solutions at all. They simply want to feel heard, and the greatest gift we can give is not a fix but genuine understanding. Active listening also transforms us, not only those we listen to, and this is a quieter benefit worth noting. When we truly listen, we actually come to understand people, to know their inner worlds, to grasp what they think and feel and why. This deep understanding enriches our relationships and our own knowledge of human beings immeasurably. The poor listener, forever waiting to speak, never truly learns the people around them. The active listener comes to know them deeply. And this understanding makes us wiser, more empathetic, better able to connect and to help. In listening well to others, we expand our own understanding of the human heart. Putting active listening into practice is a matter of intention and restraint. When someone speaks to you, give them your full attention, setting aside your phone, your distractions, and your own inner chatter. Listen to understand rather than to reply, resisting the urge to prepare your response while they are still speaking. Attend to their feelings as well as their words, and reflect back what you hear, both the content and the emotion, so they feel understood. Ask questions that draw them out, and hold back your own stories, advice, and judgments until they have fully been heard, offering understanding first and, only if it is wanted, your own contribution after. What makes active listening a true cheat code is that it offers, at no cost but genuine attention, one of the most powerful ways to connect with and be valued by other human beings, simply by giving them the rare experience of being truly heard. Most people listen only to reply, and so they leave a trail of half-heard people who feel, without knowing why, a little unseen in their presence. The one who learns to listen actively gives a gift almost no one else gives, and becomes, to those they listen to, a rare and cherished presence, discovering the old truth that to make another person feel truly heard is to make them feel truly valued, and that few things bind human beings together more deeply than that. The Pratfall Effect. We tend to believe, especially about ourselves, that the path to being liked and admired is to appear as competent, polished, and flawless as possible, to hide our mistakes and weaknesses and present an image of near perfection. And so we strain to seem always capable, always in control, never stumbling. But psychology reveals a surprising twist in how likability actually works, a twist that can free us from the exhausting pursuit of flawlessness. A well-placed, minor imperfection can actually make a competent person more likable, not less. A small stumble, a visible flaw, an admitted mistake, can endear us to others in a way that unblemished perfection never can. This is called the Pratfall Effect. The classic demonstration involved recordings of a person performing well on a difficult quiz, appearing highly competent. In one version, the person, at the end, clumsily spilled a cup of coffee on themselves, a small blunder. Listeners consistently found the competent person who committed the small blunder more likable than the one who performed flawlessly without any mishap. The little pratfall, the clumsy spill, made the impressive person more appealing rather than less. This is the effect in its essence. For a person already seen as competent, a minor visible flaw increases likability, making them warmer, more human, and more relatable. Why does this happen? A flawless, perfect person can be intimidating and difficult to relate to. Their apparent perfection creates distance, and may even provoke envy or a sense of inadequacy in others. It can seem cold, unapproachable, almost inhuman. A small flaw or blunder humanizes such a person, reminding everyone that they are, after all, a fellow human being who stumbles and errs like the rest of us. This makes them more approachable, more relatable, warmer, easier to like. The imperfection bridges the distance that competence and polish create, letting others feel closer and more at ease. We warm to those who are excellent and yet, endearingly, human. There is a crucial condition on this effect, however, and it must be understood clearly, for it is easily misread. The Pratfall Effect works only for people who are already perceived as competent. For someone seen as competent, a small flaw is endearing. But for someone already seen as less capable, a blunder does not endear. It simply confirms the impression of incompetence and makes things worse. The magic lies in the combination of genuine competence with a touch of human imperfection. It is the excellent person who stumbles who becomes more likable. The stumble works because it is set against a background of real ability. Without that competence, the flaw is just a flaw. This teaches a valuable and freeing lesson about the pursuit of perfection. Many people exhaust themselves trying to appear flawless, hiding every mistake, terrified that any visible imperfection will diminish them in others' eyes. The Pratfall Effect suggests this is not only unnecessary but counterproductive. Once you are genuinely competent, a willingness to show your human imperfections, to admit small mistakes, to laugh at your own stumbles, to not pretend to be flawless, actually makes you more likable and more relatable, not less. The polished mask of perfection creates distance. A little genuine humanity invites people in. You can let go of the impossible and exhausting effort to seem perfect, and be warmer for it. There is a deeper truth here about vulnerability and connection, one that reaches beyond the specific effect. Human beings connect through shared humanity, and our imperfections, our stumbles and flaws and admitted struggles, are part of what makes us human and relatable. A person who seems perfect gives others nothing to connect with. No shared ground of fallibility. A person who is competent yet openly human offers both something to admire and something to relate to. This is why the willingness to be a little vulnerable, to show that we too stumble, is so endearing. It says, in effect, I am capable, but I am also one of you, and that combination draws people close. You can see this in the people you yourself find most likable. They are rarely the ones who seem flawless and untouchable. They are the ones who are clearly good at what they do and yet laugh easily at their own small failings, admit when they do not know something, and let their humanity show without apology. Their competence earns respect, and their ease with their own imperfection earns affection, and the two together make them magnetic. Perfection, by contrast, tends to be admired from a distance and loved by no one, because there is no way in. Putting this into practice is less about deliberately committing blunders, which would be artificial, and more about releasing the exhausting pursuit of appearing flawless. Do your genuine best, develop real competence, and then allow yourself to be human on top of it. Do not hide every small mistake. Admit them with grace, even humor. Do not pretend to have no weaknesses. Let your human imperfections show. Laugh at your own small stumbles rather than being mortified by them. Let people see that you are capable and also, endearingly fallible. The goal is not to manufacture flaws, but to stop concealing the ones you naturally have, trusting that they make you more likable, not less. What makes the Pratfall Effect a true cheat code is that it frees you from the exhausting and counterproductive pursuit of perfection, revealing that, once you are genuinely competent, your human imperfections are not liabilities to be hidden but part of what makes you likable and relatable. Most people strain to appear flawless, creating distance and exhaustion in the effort, never suspecting that a little visible humanity would serve them better. The one who understands the Pratfall Effect does their real best and then lets themselves be human, and discovers that people warm not to the polished mask of perfection, but to the genuine person, competent and fallible both, who is unafraid to let their humanity show. The Pygmalion Effect. The expectations we hold about other people have a strange and powerful way of coming true. When we believe someone is capable, talented, and destined to do well, they often rise to meet that belief. And when we believe someone is limited, incapable, or bound to fail, they often sink to meet that expectation instead. Our beliefs about others do not stay locked inside our own heads. They leak out through our behavior and shape the very people we hold them about, becoming self-fulfilling prophecies. This phenomenon is called the Pygmalion Effect, and understanding it reveals a quiet but genuine power we hold over one another, and a cheat code for helping the people around us to flourish. The effect was famously demonstrated in a study in schools. Teachers were told that certain of their students, chosen at random, were expected to show remarkable intellectual growth in the coming year. In truth, these students were no different from their peers. Only the teacher's expectations had been altered. Yet by the end of the year, these randomly chosen students had actually improved more than their classmates. The teacher's false belief that they were exceptional had somehow made them so. The expectation, planted in the teacher's minds, had reshaped the students' real performance, a striking proof that what we expect of people can genuinely change what they become. How does an expectation held in one person's mind reshape another person's reality? Not by magic, but through the countless subtle ways our beliefs shape our behavior toward others. When a teacher believes a student is gifted, they treat that student differently, often without realizing it. They give more attention, warmer encouragement, more challenging opportunities, more patient help, more signals of confidence and belief. The student, receiving all this, responds by growing more engaged, more confident, more capable, and so actually improves. The expectation shapes the behavior shapes the other person, and the other person grows to fit the expectation. Belief becomes treatment, and treatment becomes reality. This works in both directions, and that is the sobering part. Just as high expectations can lift people up, low expectations can hold them down. When we believe someone is incapable, we tend, often unconsciously, to treat them accordingly. We give them less attention, fewer opportunities, less encouragement, more signals of doubt. And they, absorbing these signals, tend to disengage, to lose confidence, to underperform, confirming the low expectation that shaped the treatment in the first place. In this way, our doubts about people can become quiet sentences we pass upon them, limiting what they become. The Pygmalion Effect is not always benign. It can wound as surely as it can lift, depending on what we believe. This carries a profound responsibility and a profound opportunity in every relationship where we hold influence over another, as parents, teachers, leaders, mentors, friends. The expectations we hold and convey about the people in our care genuinely shape who they become. By holding and communicating high, genuine belief in others, believing in their capability and potential, treating them as though they can grow and succeed, we help create the very reality we envision, calling forth their best. This is not about false flattery or empty praise. but about genuinely believing in people's capacity to grow and letting that belief shape how we treat them. In doing so, we become, in a real sense, partial authors of what they become. There is a version of this effect that applies to ourselves as well, for the expectations we hold about our own capabilities also tend to be self-fulfilling. When we believe we can grow, learn, and succeed, we behave in ways that make growth and success more likely. We persist, we try, we engage, we recover from setbacks. When we believe we are incapable, fixed, and bound to fail, we behave in ways that confirm it. We give up easily, we avoid challenges, we disengage. Our beliefs about ourselves shape our behavior toward ourselves and our efforts, and so tend to come true. This is part of why genuine belief in one's own capacity to grow is so valuable, not as empty positivity, but as a belief that shapes the behavior that makes it real. Putting the Pygmalion effect to good use begins with becoming aware of the expectations you hold about others and about yourself, and recognizing their power. In your dealings with those you influence, cultivate and convey genuine belief in their capacity to grow and succeed, treating them in ways that call forth their best rather than confirming their worst. Guard against the quiet transmission of low expectations, the subtle signals of doubt that can limit people, and hold, for yourself, a genuine belief in your own capacity to learn and grow, letting it shape the persistent, engaged behavior that makes growth real. Expect the best, genuinely, of others and of yourself, and treat accordingly. What makes the Pygmalion effect a true cheat code is that it reveals the real and often unrecognized power our expectations hold to shape the people around us and ourselves, and hands us the ability to use that power for good. Most people hold their expectations of others carelessly, unaware that their beliefs are quietly shaping the very people they judge, sometimes lifting them and sometimes limiting them without meaning to. The one who understands the Pygmalion effect wields their expectations deliberately and generously, holding genuine belief in others' potential and their own, and discovers that to believe in someone, truly, is one of the most powerful gifts we can give, for our belief in them helps to make them what we believe they can be. Precommitment. We are, each of us, really two people across time. There is the person we are now, in a calm and clear moment, who knows what we truly want and what is good for us, and there is the person we will be later, in a moment of temptation, weakness, or heated feeling, who may want something quite different and may betray our better intentions. The great difficulty of self-control is that the second person, the one in the tempting moment, so often overrules the first. But there is a powerful cheat code that lets our wiser present self bind our weaker future self, a strategy as old as an ancient myth. It is called precommitment, sometimes known as a Ulysses contract. The name comes from the story of Ulysses, or Odysseus, and the sirens. Ulysses wished to hear the sirens' irresistible song, which lured sailors to their deaths, but knew that in the moment of hearing it he would be helpless to resist steering toward them. So, in advance, while still clear-headed, he had his sailors bind him to the mast of the ship and ordered them to plug their own ears and to refuse, no matter how he pleaded, to release him until they had passed. When the song came and Ulysses, maddened by it, begged to be freed, his bonds and his crew's deafness held him fast, and he survived. In advance, his wise self had bound his future foolish self, and won. This is the essence of precommitment. While you are in a calm, clear, rational state, you take an action that binds or constrains your future self, removing or limiting the choices you know you will be tempted to make wrongly in a weaker moment. You do not rely on your future self to have the willpower to resist temptation in the heat of the moment, because you know that willpower is unreliable precisely when it is most needed. Instead, you arrange things in advance so that the tempting choice is made difficult, costly, or impossible, so that your future self is protected from its own weakness by the foresight of your present strength. Precommitment takes countless practical forms. all following the same logic. If you want to avoid eating junk food, do not keep it in the house, so that in the tempting moment it is simply not available. If you want to avoid overspending, do not carry the means to overspend, or set up automatic saving that moves money away before you can spend it. If you want to focus without distraction, use tools that block distracting sites for a set time, or leave your phone in another room. If you want to be sure you exercise, arrange to meet a friend, so that backing out has a social cost. In each case, you use your present clarity to constrain your future weakness, binding yourself to the mast before the song begins. Why is this so much more effective than simply resolving to resist? Because it does not depend on willpower in the moment of temptation, which is exactly when willpower tends to fail. Relying on in-the-moment resolve means fighting the battle at its hardest point, against the full force of temptation, fatigue, or heated feeling. Precommitment moves the decisive battle to a different time and place, to the calm moment beforehand, when you are clear-headed and strong, and makes that single well-chosen advanced decision do the work that 100 in-the-moment struggles would otherwise require. You win the war not by fighting harder in the moment, but by arranging the field in advance so that the moment is already decided. There is a kind of humility and self-knowledge in pre-commitment that is itself valuable. To use it, you must honestly acknowledge that your future self will be weak, that you cannot fully trust yourself to resist in the tempting moment, that willpower alone will not be enough. This is not defeatism but wisdom, an accurate reckoning with human nature. The person who arrogantly believes they can resist any temptation through sheer will often fails, because they leave themselves exposed to the moment. The person who humbly admits their future weakness and binds themselves in advance succeeds, because they never let the moment have its full power. Knowing that you will be weak, and planning for it, is a form of strength. Putting pre-commitment into practice begins with identifying the situations where your future self reliably betrays your better intentions, the recurring temptations and weaknesses where in-the-moment resolve keeps failing. Then, in a calm and clear moment, you devise ways to bind or constrain that future self, removing the temptation from your environment, adding obstacles and costs to the wrong choice, making commitments to others that raise the stakes, automating the right choice so it happens without your having to decide. You arrange, in advance, for the good choice to be easy or automatic and the bad choice to be hard or impossible, and then you let your foresight carry you through. What makes pre-commitment a true cheat code is that it lets your wisest self govern your weakest self across time, winning the battles of self-control in advance, in moments of clarity, rather than losing them in moments of temptation. Most people rely on in-the-moment willpower, and so they lose again and again to their own weaker selves, resolving and failing and resolving anew. The one who masters pre-commitment stops fighting the losing battle in the tempting moment and instead binds themselves to the mast beforehand, and discovers the ancient wisdom of Ulysses, that the surest way to resist a temptation you know you cannot withstand is to arrange, while you are still strong, never to face it unbound. The fresh start effect. There is a reason that New Year's resolutions feel so natural, that Monday seems like the right day to begin a diet, that the start of a month or a birthday or the first day of a new job carries a peculiar motivational charge. Certain moments in time feel like fresh beginnings, clean breaks from the past, and at these moments we feel more motivated and more able to change, to set aside our old failures and start anew. This is not mere superstition or arbitrary custom. It is a real psychological phenomenon, and it can be harnessed deliberately as a cheat code for change. It is called the fresh start effect. The effect describes how certain temporal landmarks, moments that stand out as beginnings or dividing points in time, boost our motivation to pursue goals and make changes. The start of a new year is the most obvious, but there are many others. The first day of a month, the beginning of a week, a birthday, the start of a season, an anniversary, a move to a new home, the beginning of a new job or a new chapter of life. At these landmark moments, we feel a heightened readiness to change, a sense that a new period is beginning in which we can be different, better, freed from the failures of the past. And research confirms that people actually do initiate more goal-directed efforts around these temporal landmarks. Why do these moments have such power? Part of the answer lies in how they let us separate ourselves from our past failures. A fresh start creates a psychological boundary between the old self, the one who failed, who fell short, who did not follow through, and a new self who can begin again unburdened. At an ordinary moment, taking up a goal we have failed at before means carrying the weight of that failure. At a fresh start moment, we feel we can leave the old self and its failures behind and begin as a new person with a clean slate. This separation is motivating because it frees us from the discouragement of past failure and lets us approach the goal with renewed hope. Fresh starts also prompt us to step back and take the larger view of our lives. In the ordinary flow of days, we are absorbed in the immediate, rarely lifting our eyes to consider the bigger picture of who we are and who we want to become. Temporal landmarks interrupt this flow, marking the passage of time and prompting reflection. Another year has passed, another chapter begins. Where am I going? What do I want to change? This stepping back, this shift from the immediate to the big picture view, naturally turns our attention toward our larger goals and aspirations, and stirs the motivation to pursue them. The landmark is a natural moment of reflection, and reflection breeds resolve. Understanding the fresh start effect lets you use it deliberately rather than waiting for it to happen. You do not have to wait for the new year to make a fresh start. You can create fresh start moments whenever you need them, and time your efforts at change to coincide with them. The beginning of a new week, a new month, a new season, a birthday, or any meaningful date can serve as a launching point for a new habit or goal, lending its motivational charge to your effort. You can even manufacture a sense of fresh start by framing a moment as a new beginning, marking it deliberately as the start of a new chapter, and drawing on the renewed motivation that framing provides. There is a caution to observe, however, so that the fresh start effect is used as a tool rather than an excuse. The danger of fresh starts is that they can become a way of endlessly deferring change, always waiting for the next Monday, the next month, the next year to begin, and using the wait as a reason not to start now. The fresh start becomes a procrastinator's excuse. I will begin when the new week starts, and so the present opportunity is wasted. The effect is powerful when used to launch real change, but it must not become a way to postpone. If a fresh start moment is near, it can be worth timing your launch to it, but you should never let the absence of one become a reason to delay indefinitely. Putting the fresh start effect into practice means using temporal landmarks deliberately as launching points for change. When you want to begin a new habit or pursue a goal, consider timing your start to coincide with a meaningful fresh start moment, drawing on its motivational lift. Use the natural reflection these moments prompt to step back and consider your larger goals. Frame the moment consciously as a new beginning, a clean break from past failures, and let that framing free you from discouragement. And create your own fresh starts when you need them, rather than waiting only for the calendar to provide them, while being careful never to let the wait become an excuse for delay. What makes the fresh start effect a true cheat code is that it lets you harness the natural motivational power of beginnings, using the sense of a clean slate to launch change with renewed hope and energy, freed from the weight of past failure. Most people experience fresh starts only passively, feeling the pull of the new year without understanding or directing it, and often letting the feeling fade. The one who understands the fresh start effect uses it deliberately, timing and framing their efforts at change to draw on the power of beginnings, and discovers that the past need not bind the future, that at the right moment, marked and seized, we can genuinely set down the self who failed and begin again as the self we mean to become. Loss aversion framing. There is a deep asymmetry in the human mind, one of the most reliable findings in all of psychology. We feel the pain of a loss far more intensely than the pleasure of an equivalent gain. Losing a certain amount of money hurts more than gaining the same amount pleases. The threat of losing something we have grips us more powerfully than the prospect of gaining something we do not. This tendency, called loss aversion, means that losses loom larger than gains in our minds, and though it is a bias, it can be turned into a genuine cheat code, both for motivating ourselves and for understanding the choices of others. The key is in how a situation is framed, as a potential gain or as a potential loss. Loss aversion runs deep in us, and it makes a certain evolutionary sense. For our ancestors, a loss could be far more consequential than a gain of the same size. Losing your food or your shelter could mean death, while gaining a little extra was merely pleasant. A mind especially sensitive to losses, quick to protect what it had, would have survived better than one indifferent to loss. And so we inherited a psychology in which the fear of losing is a more powerful motivator than the hope of gaining, in which we will often work harder and risk more to avoid a loss than to secure an equivalent gain. This asymmetry shapes our choices constantly, usually without our noticing. The cheat code lies in recognizing that the very same situation can be framed either as a gain or as a loss, and that the loss framing tends to be far more motivating. Consider a goal you want to achieve. You can frame it in terms of what you stand to gain by succeeding, or in terms of what you stand to lose by failing, and because losses loom larger, the loss framing often provides more powerful motivation. The prospect of losing something, money, a reputation, a streak of progress, something you have committed, tends to drive action more forcefully than the prospect of gaining something of equal value. By framing your goals and stakes in terms of loss, you can harness this asymmetry to strengthen your own motivation. This principle underlies one of the most effective commitment techniques, in which you put something you value at risk of loss, contingent on your following through. You might, for example, commit to a goal and arrange that if you fail, you will lose a sum of money, or something else you care about. Because the pain of that potential loss looms so large in your mind, it motivates you far more powerfully than a simple hope of success would, and you become much more likely to follow through. You are deliberately engineering a potential loss and letting loss aversion drive you toward your goal. The same logic explains why protecting a streak, an unbroken chain of days, can be so motivating. Each day, you are driven not to lose what you have built. Loss aversion also illuminates the behavior of others. People will often go to great lengths to avoid losing something they already have, more than they would to gain the same thing anew. This is why we cling to what we own, why we resist giving things up even when we might be better off doing so, why the fear of loss makes people cautious and protective of the status quo. Understanding that losses loom larger than gains helps make sense of much otherwise puzzling behavior, and helps us communicate more effectively, since framing a choice in terms of what someone stands to lose often moves them more than framing it in terms of what they stand to gain. There is, of course, a shadow side to be aware of, both so that we are not manipulated and so that we use the principle wisely. Because loss framing is so powerful, it is a favorite tool of those who would persuade or pressure us. The warnings of what we will lose if we do not act, the fear of missing out, the pressure of a closing opportunity. Recognizing loss aversion helps us see when our fear of loss is being deliberately provoked to move us, so that we can respond thoughtfully rather than reactively. And in using loss framing on ourselves, we should be careful not to create so much fear of loss that it produces anxiety rather than healthy motivation. The tool is powerful, and power calls for care. Putting loss aversion to good use means framing your goals and commitments in ways that engage the powerful motivation of avoiding loss, rather than only the weaker motivation of seeking gain. Where it helps, put something you value at stake, so that failure means a real loss, and let the fear of that loss drive your follow-through. Build streaks and chains of progress that you are motivated to protect. Frame the stakes of your efforts in terms of what you stand to lose. And when communicating with others, consider framing choices in terms of loss where appropriate. At the same time, stay alert to loss framing used upon you, and use the tool on yourself with enough care that it motivates without overwhelming. What makes loss aversion framing a true cheat code is that it lets you harness one of the deepest asymmetries of the human mind, the way losses loom larger than gains, turning a mere bias into a powerful engine of motivation and a lens for understanding behavior. Most people are moved by loss aversion constantly without ever recognizing it, driven by fears of loss they do not examine and missing the chance to use the same force deliberately. The one who understands loss aversion can frame their own goals to draw on its power, make sense of the otherwise puzzling choices of others, and guard against those who would use the fear of loss to manipulate, turning a quirk of human nature into a quiet tool of self-mastery. The default effect. Of all the forces that shape human behavior, one of the most powerful is also one of the most invisible: the default. Whatever option is pre-selected, whatever happens automatically if we do nothing, whatever requires no choice or effort on our part, tends overwhelmingly to be what we end up with. We like to believe we actively choose the important things in our lives, but in truth, a great deal of what we do is simply whatever was set as the default, accepted passively because changing it would require effort and a decision. This is called the default effect, and once you understand it, you can use the power of defaults deliberately, both to shape your own behavior and to understand how the world quietly shapes you. The evidence for the power of defaults is striking, sometimes startlingly so. In many domains, the single most important factor determining what people choose turns out to be not their preferences or values, but simply what the default option was. Consider the well-known example of organ donation. In countries where people are donors by default and must actively opt out, the great majority remain donors, while in otherwise similar countries where people must actively opt in to become donors, only a minority do. The difference is enormous, and it comes almost entirely from which choice was the default. The same pattern appears across countless domains, from savings plans to subscriptions. The default option is accepted far more often than not, whatever it happens to be. Why do defaults have such power over us? Several forces converge. First, changing a default requires effort, a decision, and an action, and we are strongly inclined toward the path of least resistance, toward doing nothing rather than something. Second, a default often carries an implicit suggestion, a sense that it is the recommended or normal choice, which we are inclined to trust. Third, and more subtly, the default becomes a kind of reference point, a status quo that we are reluctant to depart from, since loss aversion makes any change from it feel like a potential loss. Together, these forces mean that the default exerts a quiet, constant pull, and that most people, most of the time, simply go along with whatever it is. Understanding this reveals something humbling about our behavior. Much of what we do is not actively chosen at all, but passively accepted, determined by defaults we never examined. The apps whose settings we never changed, the subscriptions we never cancelled, the routines we drifted into, the options that were pre-selected for us, all of these shape our lives far more than we realize, not because we chose them, but because we did not bother to choose otherwise. Recognizing this is the first step toward reclaiming some of that passively surrendered control, toward noticing the defaults that govern us and deciding, deliberately, whether we actually want them. The cheat code, then, works in two directions. The first is to take control of your own defaults, deliberately setting the defaults in your life to support the behavior you want, so that the path of least resistance leads where you wish to go. Since you will tend to do whatever is automatic and requires no effort, you can arrange your defaults, your environment, your automatic settings, your standing routines, so that the good behavior is the default and the bad behavior requires active effort to reach. Make saving automatic, so that it happens by default. Set your devices and spaces so that the healthy, productive option is the pre-selected one. Design your defaults with care, and let the default effect carry you. The second direction is to become aware of the defaults set for you by others, so that you are not passively governed by choices you never made. Much of the world is deliberately designed with defaults that serve the designer's interests rather than yours. Subscriptions that renew by default, settings that favor the company, options pre-selected to nudge you a certain way. By recognizing the power of defaults and the fact that they are often set for someone else's benefit, you can pause and ask, at the important junctures, whether the default actually serves you, and actively choose otherwise when it does not. Awareness turns you from a passive acceptor of defaults into a deliberate chooser. Putting the default effect into practice means, on one hand, deliberately designing the defaults in your own life to support your goals, arranging things so that the behavior you want is what happens automatically, requiring no effort or decision, while the behavior you want to avoid requires active effort to reach. On the other hand, it means becoming alert to the defaults set for you by others, questioning them rather than passively accepting them, and actively choosing when the default does not serve you. In both cases, you stop being ruled by defaults unconsciously and begin to take deliberate command of them, either setting your own or consciously overriding those set for you. What makes the default effect a true cheat code is that it reveals one of the quietest and most powerful forces shaping behavior, the pull of whatever happens automatically, and lets you take command of it, designing your defaults to carry you toward your goals and refusing to be passively governed by the defaults others set. Most people drift through lives shaped largely by defaults they never examined, mistaking passive acceptance for active choice. The one who understands the default effect takes hold of the automatic, arranging their own defaults to serve them and questioning the ones imposed by others, and discovers that a great deal of the power to shape a life lies not in the dramatic choices we agonize over, but in the quiet setting of the defaults that decide what happens when we do nothing at all.